Hello, and welcome back to a very spooky episode of the Alexander Society. I'm your host, intrepid amateur monster hunter Derek, joined by my friend and co-host, the ghoul hiding under my bed, Tim. How you doing, Tim?
Just got off a shift where I only had to stay 10 minutes late when I was expecting I'd probably have to stay until like 9, so it was decent. Collins.
Yeah,
But that and then Vegeta's being an attention whore tonight in a mostly good way while we're recording. How are you doing, best buddy, old pal of mine?
Oh, how am I doing? Nothing to report. Working at a university during fall semester can get very stressful.
No shit, Sherlock.
It gets a lot busier,
especially in Trumpian times.
It's not even anything to do with that. It's just like, because I don't know what it is about Oklahoma. I guess just because Oklahoma's a red state, but we haven't had a lot of shit happening that the university's been affected by. But what's really been fucking with me is just trying to. We get a lot of first years coming in. They're fresh-faced graduates, just finished their bachelors and don't know how anything works in grad school, and not sure like how to do anything in the office and the clinic. And so a big portion of my job has just become like, showing somebody born in like 2004 how to use how to use like a fax machine. How to use an office printer. So that's just taken up a large chunk of my day. Plus it just got a lot busier, and just because now we're back open like full from the summer. But it's not bad. It's fine. This is still not a bad job. I'm not tearing my hair. I'm not dreading going to work every morning, which is always nice.
So you're doing better than I.
Anyways, you wanna talk about what we're drinking?
Yes. So tonight, I am drinking a beer from Dead Armadillo Craft Brewing here in Tulsa, called Josh and the Giant Peach. It's a sour ale made with peaches. To me, it tastes like a peach ring that's been made into a beer. I'm trying to find my ABV. Oh yeah, like I might have to get another 4-pack just for you. There is no ABV on here. Interesting. I'm gonna have to go to their website because it's on there. And then I found Astral Tequila. It's a tequila. It's a Blanco tequila, and it's your normal 40% ABV. What are you drinking, Derek?
Oh, what am I drinking tonight? I think I found my new favorite. Oh, hey, hello, Bobo. I think I found my new favorite liquor store near where I live. They had this shit in there when I went in to get some liquor. It's OK Cider Company, barrel-aged Appletoberfest, hard cider. So it's just a regular apple cider, but barrel-aged. So it ends up coming out very dry. It's a very dry sip, but it really works. Like the apple is subdued, and it's kind of like the best way I could this is going to sound really snobby, but the best way I can describe it, it's a really teasing flavor. The apple is teasing you, and I don't know, it's just doing something for me. And it is a shocking 8.4% ABV, which I'm a big fan of. Also, they have them bottled in like these old-fashioned looking like brown tonic bottles.
Oh yeah, that bottle's badass.
That I really like. They're really, really, really aesthetically nice bottles. I really like them. And then for my shots, we just keep coming back. We were both going to do Deep Eddy tonight.
Yeah, I almost did, but my options were lemon, lime, and red grapefruit. And I'm not a big fan of red grapefruit, and lemon and lime are just too basic for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, so for my shooter, I got some Deep Eddy pineapple this time because I was spoiled for choice for Deep Eddy flavors at this place. So I went ahead and just pineapple sounded really good. It came down to either peach or pineapple.
I'm surprised you didn't go with peach, but hey ho, pineapple sounds delicious too.
Pineapple sounds so good. I'm so excited to try this stuff. So yeah, it's 35%. Austin, Texas classic. You know it. You love it. It's Deep Eddy.
Oh yeah, Deep Eddy is the shit.
Ooh. So Tim, how about them rules?
Yes, the rules. Let me get them pulled up here.
Yeah. So here in our illustrious society, we abide by an ever-changing set of rules. Tim, would you care to do the honors?
Rule number 1: every time the ruler of Wallachia is overthrown, we're gonna take a sip.
Excellent pronunciation. You got it right first try.
Okay, watch a lot of shit like fantasy, whatever, and anytime like vampires or something is brought up, Wallachia is pronounced. So like I can pronounce it decently. I won't say I get it right every time, but like I've heard it pronounced enough that I'm not gonna like fuck up too bad.
Rule number 2: every time our subject impales someone, we're going to take 3 sips.
Rule number 3: anytime Tim or Derek make a Hellsing Ultimate Abridged reference, we're gonna do what, brother?
We are going to take a shot. Prost.
Cheers. So, tell us about Vlad the Impaler, Derek.
So, yeah, what do you know about Vlad the Impaler?
So I know he was the inspiration for Dracula, but and a lot of people over the years have tried to conflate that to saying he was Dracula, but everyone knows it's just he was the inspiration, blah 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 blah, and it's a lot of his exploits that I'm pretty sure were overindulged in media at the time because I've heard he wasn't certain things he didn't do like and all that, but the his epithet comes from because he would get people's heads and impale them on a fucking spike and show it off.
Okay. So yes, he was famous for impaling people. I'll let you know right now, it wasn't just their heads. And as a little spoiler, they were still alive when he did the impaling. Yeah. And also, yes, a lot of his stories were exaggerated. He never drank blood. Obviously, that's not something that people do. But I will.
I mean, if you've listened to some of the small town murder episodes, people really tried to make it work.
Never it.
I think there's at least twice now they've done a vampire and the person tried to drink blood.
Yeah, lots of people want to be badass and try to drink blood, and it never works out because turns out the human body is not designed to drink blood.
Ooh, poor, so sad. Fucking edgelords.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. But one thing that I hope you take away from this episode is that even though those stories about him were exaggerated, they were not exaggerated by much.
He was still a scary motherfucker.
He was a fucking terrifying person.
Oh yeah, like you would not want to catch him on the street.
No, absolutely not. Because it did not take a lot for him to start pulling out the stakes.
I can imagine.
But he's one of those guys that, like, he was It's kind of up in the air because we don't know a lot about him, because this was just an area of Europe, even though it was during a time when they were starting to get a little bit better at recording history. We were just coming out of the Middle Ages. We're just getting into the early modern period. In fact, a lot of what we know about his story comes from like very early like typeset printing. Like his story was some of the first stories that became like prolific bestsellers in Europe with the invention of the movable type.
Gotcha.
But even though it was kind of that era of history, he just lived in an area that was extremely backwater compared to a lot of Europe at the time. And so even though when he died, he was one of the most famous people in Europe, and even then, we still aren't even exactly sure how or when he died, just because the records aren't there.
Interesting.
So it's really complicated kind of talking about this guy, and there's a lot of open-ended questions that we don't really know. Did this guy do the things that we know he did because he was a sadist, or did he do it because he recognized something about the political moment that other people just kind of didn't? And that's the big thing. I tend to think it was kind of a mix of both, but we just can't really know for sure. All I can really give you is just the nitty-gritty of what it is that we do know.
Gotcha.
And we can kind of speculate from there, because that is a favorite of historians, is speculating on who Vlad Dracula was and why he did the things that he did. That's a classic of the genre.
Oh yeah.
But before we can talk about Vlad, we got to talk about a pretty big subject on its own, which I'm going to condense very hard. And that is the rise of the Ottoman Empire.
Oh boy, the Ottomans again.
The Ottomans again. So, since around 1100, there was this Muslim state in Anatolia called the Sultanate of Rum. And Rum is R-U-M. It's the Turkish word for Rome.
Gotcha.
They were basically the Sultanate of Rome, because they had conquered this land from the Byzantine Empire, which was the Eastern Roman Empire, and were kind of consciously trying to take the mantle of like Byzantine splendor for themselves, but with they were trying to be Rome with a Muslim coat of paint. That was the basic idea.
Gotcha.
They conquered a lot of the Eastern Roman Empire, especially after the devastating Battle of Manzikert, ended up forcing the Byzantines out of the region.
Quick show note. Can we try and start sending the rules into Discord going forward? You can do it through both. I just want to be able to have it on my screen a little bit more. That way it's a little bit easier. I'm going to send it into the chat right here. So, because I've already got it pulled up. It just makes it easier to have you and that right there.
So, of course, like, the Battle of Manzikert would also eventually become, like, the impetus for the First Crusade. So, this is kind of the era where we're...
Same timeline, kind of.
Yeah, the Ottomans... The two big things that kind of eventually lead to the rise of the Ottoman Empire was, one, the Crusades, and two, the expansion of the Mongol Empire. Because for about 200 years, the Sultanate of Rum was the primary Muslim force that had threatened the continued survival of the Byzantine Empire. Through the late 13th century, though, Rum came under the influence of the Mongol Khanate as they were moving into the Middle East. So the Mongols came in, started gobbling up a lot of the Middle East, a lot of the traditional powers that kind of ruled in the Middle East, a lot of these old sultanates, emirates, like that, and kind of subsumed the traditional powers, Muslim powers that existed in the region. And as a result of this sort of political instability, the Sultanate of Rum kind of ended up went from being like the one big great power in the Anatolian Peninsula that was able to focus all of their energy on pushing back the Byzantines inch by inch, and ended up being stuck between these two very powerful military forces, and kind of turning from like military expansion to kind of just balancing political influence between these two powers, and were eventually unsuccessful, and their state started to shatter and fall apart. And it fell apart into these little statelets in Anatolia that were ruled by these warlords called beys. These little statelets were called beyliks. One of these beyliks was a guy named Osman the First. We know so little about Osman the First that he might as well be Hercules. He might as well just be a mythical figure. We're not even completely sure if he existed as one person.
Damn.
There was some guy that ruled over one of these statelets that ended up expanding and conquering all of the former territories of the Sultanate of Rum, and then turned around and started completely taking over the Byzantine Empire, just in a very quick pace, gobbling up inch by inch of Byzantine land, until eventually they had all of the Anatolian Peninsula. Then they moved into Greece, captured most of Greece, and then they started moving up into the Balkans, until eventually all that was left of the Byzantine Empire was just the city of Constantinople. And they had it completely surrounded. And Osman, when his name is translated, it sort of ended up becoming anglicized. It got anglicized into Ottoman. And so that is where we get the name Ottoman Empire. It's the empire that was founded by the House of Osman. So, by the late 1300s, this young Ottoman state had conquered most of Anatolia and was starting to chomping up all the territory of the Byzantines. By 1411, they had conquered the lands of the former Bulgarian Empire, which was the Balkans, basically like south of the Danube. And they were well on their way to breaking up the Serbian Empire, which is the former power that ruled kind of like the Western Balkans against the coast of the Adriatic Sea. So they were moving up very fast. This was scary in Europe because for most people this was like, oh, this foreign power is starting to like encroach on our territory and threatening my regional power. Like all of these like kings and princes and dukes were scared that like they were going to be forced out of power or forced into serving this like foreign conqueror. For a few people, this was like, because this is right after like the last of the Crusades in the Middle East, and the last of like the Crusader states were forced out, and that was still fresh in a lot of.
So what you're saying is the Catholics were crusading?
Keep going.
I mean, there weren't Nazis, but I'm sure someone was invading who was a bigot.
The Catholics are crusading. The Ottomans are invading.
Yep, that works.
All right, Prost.
Cheers.
So, for a lot of these guys, this was kind of a spiritual existential threat, because a lot of people saw it as like the church has been forced out of the Middle East, and now the tides are turning and the Muslims are at our gates. This might be the end of Christendom and the end times are nigh. That was a big kind of, that was the QAnon of its day, and it's that kind of attitude that would, tangentially related. It was that attitude that would eventually motivate Christopher Columbus to go and find a sea route to Asia, which eventually got him to the Americas, because he was terrified about the idea of Muslims conquering Europe, and thought that the end times were near, and like an existential war between Christendom and Islam was about to launch off. And so he wanted to establish trade routes to Asia, so that the Christian forces in Europe would have a steady stream of income from trade with East Asia, so that they would have plenty of money to fight the Muslims when the apocalypse began. That's why he did that. So that's, like I said, this is the QAnon of its time, and it was it wasn't insanely popular. There were a lot of like more immediate political motivations behind Christians like trying to push back against the Ottomans, but that was influencing people at the time. One of the main Christian forces that was trying to hold back the Ottomans was, of course, the Kingdom of Hungary, which at the time was one of the more powerful states in like the late medieval Europe. They had strong ties to the. Not all of Hungary was part of the Holy Roman Empire, but a lot of Holy Roman emperors had also been king of Hungary, and also a lot of Polish kings had also been king of Hungary. So it was a state that had a lot of connections to a lot of other very powerful Christian states in Europe. So, in 1387, the son of the King of Bohemia, this guy named Sigismund of Luxembourg, was elected King of Hungary and Croatia. His primary goal as king was to rally the support of Christian lords across Central and Eastern Europe in order to push back the tide of the Ottoman Empire. Generally speaking, he was not successful at this. But one of his ideas was the foundation of a knightly order of crusaders. Crusaders, I put that in air quotes because they weren't doing a lot of
crusading.
They would do a couple of crusades. They weren't like crusades like we would recognize. They were very small, very regional, not very successful.
Would it be more accurate to call them more similar to a pogrom?
No, because I'm sure they did some pogroms along the way, but a pogrom is a really specific thing. A pogrom is like when a mob goes and burns down a Jewish neighborhood. That's
okay.
But he founded this sort of knightly crusader order that had the main goal of fighting the Ottomans and protecting the Hungarian throne from internal and external threats. This organization had a number of names. In German, it was the Gesellschaft mit dem Drachen. In Latin, it was the Fraternitas Draconum. In Romanian, it was the Ordinaruli de Dracul. I think I pronounced that right. Romanian is really difficult. But today in English, we know it as the Order of the Dragon. In 1431, one guy would be inducted into the Order of the Dragon. This guy was from Wallachia, a region which is today in modern-day Romania. He'd been an illegitimate son of this guy named Mircea I, who was the voivod of Wallachia. And the voivod is basically it's basically like a prince. I think it's about the same rank as like a prince. So it's not quite a king, but it's more than like a duke or something.
Okay, so their princes have actual it's more than just a title. They have responsibilities, I mean.
Yeah, like the overall ruler of Wallachia. In English we'd call him a prince. In Slavic languages it's called the voivod. But yeah, he was essentially the king of Wallachia.
Gotcha.
And this guy, the illegitimate son of Mircea I, who is the voivod of Wallachia, had grown up as a political prisoner of Sigismund of Hungary. So he'd grown up, he was Wallachian, but he grew up in Hungary under Sigismund. And he would eventually, in 1431, he was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, and due to his membership in the Order of the Dragon, he would come to be remembered by his honorific title. His first name is Vlad, and he was known as Vlad Dracul, which translated as Vlad the Dragon.
I always assumed that Dracul had more I assumed that it had somewhere to connection to the Dracula reference, but the thematic part, I assumed it was a bat or some part of that.
Bat, it is, Dracul is Romanian for dragon. He was Vlad the Dragon. Around the same time that he was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, he would have his second son. Or his wife would have his second son. His second son he would name after himself, Vlad. And Vlad would come to be called Vlad, son of the Dragon. Also known as, in Romanian, Vlad Dracula. So that's what Dracula means. It means son of the dragon.
So you're saying Vlad the Impaler is a junior?
He is a junior. He's actually the third.
Fuck! Jimmy and James are on fucking point with those rules.
Undefeated theory. Undefeated social theory. So, Wallachia was a complicated place during this period. And when I say complicated, I mean, I am not doing justice to the political fuckery that was going on in Wallachia during this time. A lot of the shit that I'm going to tell you today is hugely condensed, and even then it's still going to be super complicated. It's such a fascinating period of history. Because Wallachia is one of 3 regions that would end up later on forming into one country that we now call Romania. Those 3 regions were Wallachia in the south, Moldavia in the north, and Transylvania to the west. And Transylvania you've probably heard of.
Yeah, Transylvania is the more well-known. Wallachia is like that second left one, and then anything else I really just don't know dick about.
Moldavia is a good chunk of what is traditionally Moldavia is now part of Ukraine, but most of it is now like northern Romania. And these three regions, they kind of they kind of share like a traditional cultural background. Like you can date like the foundation of their sort of culture all the way back to the Roman Empire, because this was a region that was controlled by the Roman Empire very briefly, and so it has a strong Latin influence. It's the only country in Eastern Europe that, even though it's Slavic, it has a Romance language. Romanian is a Romance language, like French and Italian. And that's because it's directly descended from Latin. Because it was originally, like, the modern Romanian people are kind of descended from those Romans who settled in that area. But a lot of political fuckery and geographic borders had kind of made them 3 distinct kinds of people. So you have, like, in Transylvania, you have, like, a lot of their population is very influenced by German culture, because they're a little bit more connected to Central Europe in Transylvania. Moldavia has a lot of influence from like steppe horse people, like the Mongols, the Tatars, people like that. And then Wallachia has a lot of influence from most recently, like from the Ottomans. So they're receiving a lot of like Turkish cultural influence during this time. Wallachia being the southernmost part of this area, bordering on the Danube River. You hop over the Danube River and you're in the Ottoman Empire. That's how close it is. This area is so heavily contested for influence between the Ottoman Empire and Hungary that civil wars are just a constant fact of life in Wallachia. It is constantly having the nobility in Wallachia, they're called the boyars, are constantly fighting and backbiting, and there's a lot of political intrigue. They're receiving a lot of resources and influence from each side of this sort of conflict, and they're kind of the proxy. The civil wars in Wallachia are kind of the proxy war between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, and it causes this constant revolving door of voivodes. You very rarely had a voivode who lasted more than a couple years in power in Wallachia, and very often you'd have them last like a few months, because as soon as like one guy would come to power, the Hungarians wouldn't like it. They'd send in an army, overthrow him, put their own guy in power. The Ottomans wouldn't like that. They'd send in an army, overthrow him, put their guy in power. It was constant, all the time. And it made...
So here's just a couple sips, since that's technically our first rule, although it's hard to track that since you're not going into detail.
Yeah, I'm not... we'll count it now, but we're going to talk about a lot of that in this episode.
Gotcha.
So, at this time, about 1431, Vlad the II, Dracula, his brother, his half brother and his cousin were in the middle of a war for control over Wallachia at the time. And so while they were duking it out, as he kind of came of age, he gets inducted into the Order of the Dragon. He has a family now. He's starting to...
This is the second, right?
Yes, this is the second. We're talking about the Impaler's dad. He's kind of bouncing back and forth around Eastern Europe, trying to find allies to kind of help him kind of move in and assert himself in the Wallachian political scene, so that he can kind of assert his own claim to the Wallachian throne. So in 1436, Vlad's brother Alexander died, and he'd been the most recent voivode of Wallachia, and he'd been an ally of the Ottoman Sultan Murad II. And after his death, Vlad was able to cobble together an army of Transylvanian peasants and a few exiled Wallachian boyars, and he invaded, overthrew his brother Alexander, and installed himself as voivod. So 1436, Vlad the Elder, or Vlad the Second as he comes to be known, moves in, he becomes voivod, and the first thing he does when he gets there, even though he's supposedly supposed to be a member of this Order of the Dragon, loyal to the Hungarian throne, he immediately cuts a deal with the Ottomans. And he's like, okay, I'll be your guy here.
Suddenly it reeks of hypocrisy in here.
It reeks of hypocrisy in here. Well, if it isn't the Catholic Church.
Oh, if isn't the Catholic Church. What is this? The Timmy grew to your crotch. Progress! And, look what we have here. A bloody heathen. Excuse me. A motherfucking vampire. I've killed a lot of people to get this title, and I deserve to be called such. Cheers.
Prost. Open. I'm sorry. He doesn't side with the Ottomans quite yet. The first thing he does when he gets to power is he wants to throw his weight around a little bit, and so he decides to basically take the treaty that Wallachia had with the Ottomans before and ripped it up. So that's the first thing he does. Yeah, which pissed off the Sultan, Murad II, and so he decided to put Wallachia back in its place and invaded. Vlad wasn't too worried about this at first because he still had his old friend Sigismund to help him out. So he shoots a letter to Sigismund. He's like, hey, Ottomans are invading. Send help. Your old buddy in the Order of the Dragon, please. He didn't know that by the time his letter got there, Sigismund was fucking dead.
Pour one out for Sigismund.
To be fair, he was 69.
Yeah, that's old.
That's like, in the Middle Ages, that's like 108. So, immediately following his death, Hungary suffered several internal revolts that completely kept them out of the war, and so Vlad ended up being completely fucked.
Get fucked, noob.
So, instead of getting his ass kicked back across the Carpathian Mountains and losing his throne, he cut his losses and he pledged fealty to the Ottoman Sultan.
So what you're saying is he got fucked, so he had to, hypocrisy right there, like I had said?
Right, yeah. So the Sultan then decided that since Hungary was completely crippled by Sigismund's death, this was a golden opportunity to invade. So, Dracula gathered his troops and marched on Hungary alongside the Ottoman army. The Ottomans, with Dracula's help, managed to sack several Hungarian cities and left with a shit ton of loot and 30,000 captives. Then, after the Ottomans left, Vlad reached back out to the new Hungarian king that had just been elected, King Albert of Habsburg, which, by the way, this is one of the Habsburg family. This is when they were first starting to get big. This was like one of their first major... I think this was actually the first king in their family.
So what you're saying is bourgeois' first power?
Yeah, it's a little baby family coming up in the world. Nobody knew where they would be going with it. So, King Albert of Habsburg he reached out to King Albert, offered an olive branch. Albert called him a traitor and told him to fuck off.
Nice.
Then Sultan Murad found out that Dracula had done this, and now the Ottomans didn't trust him either.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really, and this was just in a couple years. This was just, this happened real fast, and he's already boned. Albert died in 1439, pretty quickly after that, and the boyars of Hungary elected King, I fucking hate pronouncing this name. It's the name Vladislav, but it's the Polish version of the name, so it's like Władysław. You have to put the W at the beginning before the L, so it's like Władysław. And God, it's so annoying to say. I don't know how the Polish do it.
I'm not going to even try.
Yeah. Anything, King Vladislav III of Poland, he was elected King of Hungary. Vladislav appointed this guy to become the Voivod of Transylvania, which was under the control of Hungary, but they had their own Voivod. You might have heard this name before. It might have come up when we were talking about Elizabeth Bathory. I can't remember for sure. But this guy's name was John Hunyadi.
I feel like there was a John in the story, but remember my research on that topic was flawed because I used a fanfic and didn't realize it.
Yeah, I can't remember because I think John Hunyadi was the Captain General who kind of led the investigation. Because it would have been around this time. It would have been around the time that we're talking about right now, was when Elizabeth Bathory was put on trial.
Two people that were, like, depicted as, like, vampires. Because Bathory supposedly killed a lot of fucking people to bathe in blood, supposedly.
Yeah. Yet another sort of vampiric story. This period of history produced a lot of vampire stories. It's incredible. Anyways, John Hunyadi, he's appointed the Voivod of Transylvania. He's one of those guys in history who reads like a real-life action hero. So he spent most of his life as a... But yeah, this guy, John Hunyadi, basically spent his entire... Ernest Hemingway? Oh, yeah. Hemingway's so fucking cool. I love that dude. I wouldn't call him a great guy, but he was a cool guy. But yeah, John Hunyadi spent basically his entire adult life at war. Like, the list... When I went, reading an overview on him when I was first doing the script, I went to his Wikipedia page, and the list, in his, at the very top, it has, his basic stats, and at the bottom, it has, a list of all of the wars that he fought in and all the different battles that he fought in, and it needed a drop-down menu. There were so many. And one of his favorite activities was killing Ottomans. That's what he loved in life. To conquer the Ottoman, to see them driven before him, and to hear the lamentations of their women.
What the fuck is... No, I assumed it was something else. What does lamentations actually mean?
You know, when somebody laments, they're crying out in despair. Have you never heard that Conan the Barbarian quote?
No.
No? Somebody asks Conan, what is great in life? And he answers, to defeat the enemy, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. Anyways, so yeah, he really liked killing Ottomans. In fact, almost as soon as he came to power in Transylvania, he raised an army and started fighting the Ottomans, and kicked their absolute ass. In every engagement, he basically single-handedly pushed them out of the Balkans. John was also just, he was a soldier. He wasn't sentimental. He was a practical guy. He understood that the things that Vlad did were purely political. He didn't hold this is Vlad II. So Hunyadi comes in, kicks the Ottomans out of the Balkans, or at least most of the Balkans, and he thought that making a deal with Vlad II would be a good way to restore Hungarian power to the region, which is, the traditional way that they did that was instead of just trying to kick a guy out, you'd cut a deal with them, and if they didn't play ball, then you'd go and kick them out. And so Vlad wanted to do that, but he couldn't do that while the Ottomans were still breathing down his neck. And so he didn't officially cut a deal, but he started secretly helping John. Unfortunately, somehow the Sultan found out and had Vlad arrested. He then sent in an army, and he tried to annex Wallachia. He just decided, okay, well, we're just going to annex Wallachia. We won't deal with all of this political crap. We'll just make it part of the Ottoman Empire. He tried to do that, but then Hunyadi came in and destroyed the Ottoman army. And then, because Vlad was no longer there to rule, he brought Vlad's cousin, this guy named Basarab, and put him in power instead. So in the end, John still got a guy that was loyal to Hungary and Wallachia. But now Vlad was in prison. So, after a few months of prison, Murad...
Sip?
Yes, yeah, that is a sip. After a few months in prison, Sultan Murad started negotiating with Vlad, and Vlad agreed to the Sultan's terms. The Sultan said, I will free you, I will let you go, and I will help you retake the throne of Wallachia under 3 conditions. 1, you have to take an oath never to raise arms against the Ottoman Empire again under pain of death. 2, you have to give a yearly tribute to the Ottomans both in gold and in young Christian boys to become Janissaries. Do you know what Janissaries are?
No, I do not.
They were the elite fighting, like the elite professional fighting force of the Ottoman Empire, who were completely composed of Christian boys who would be kidnapped as tribute from the Christian lands of the Ottoman Empire in order to be enslaved, forcibly converted to Islam, and then trained as soldiers from an early age.
So are you saying they were the Ottomans' necessary evil?
You're gonna... God, it's been a while since we watched. Which part is that a reference to?
Who are we? The necessary evil! Why are we necessary? To purge the world of evil worse than man! And why are we? God's chosen few, ordained to undertake this unholy task, because no one else will! And because it's fucking fun!
And because it's fucking fun! Shipping up to Boston to play in the background. Prost.
That one was a little bit of a stretch, but not in like the worst way I've ever made a rule stretch. That was fun to do right there. I don't think you saw that one coming.
I didn't see that one coming, no. And because it's fucking fun.
Fun!
Yeah, I think. Anyways, so yeah, that was the second term, yearly tribute to the Ottomans in gold and young Christian boys to be enslaved and turned into Janissaries. And then the third was that the third condition was that he had to leave, when he went back to Wallachia, he had to leave his 2 sons behind as political prisoners. Or 2 of his sons behind, his second and third oldest. His second being Vlad the Third, and the third...
Interesting. The firstborn was not the junior. The double junior.
Right, yeah. Yeah, Vlad the Third was the second-born.
That's odd.
I can't even remember the first one's name because he dies really quickly after this, but yeah, the Vlad is the second oldest, and then his younger brother is Radu.
Radu? That's a fucking weird name, but
It's a Romanian name. It's Slavic. So, Vlad.
More Slavic than fucking Andrew Tate, that piece of shit.
So yeah, Vlad the Third was born sometime around the same time that his dad joined the Order of the Dragon. We don't know who his mother was, because like I said, records were really sparse, and nobody bothered to write her fucking name down.
Fucking weird.
So we don't know who his mom is. He was probably born... There's 2 possibilities. Either he was born...
I have another reference. I gotta find the quote first.
Maybe we should have kept the impaling one the rule, because...
God damn, yes! How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman drop in the middle of a forgotten spot in an Italian village without a roof for sleeping under, grow up to be a deadly demon hunter?
You can't even sing it, you're laughing too hard.
Fuck you! I was laughing at you!
Bitch, I eat people!
Cheers!
Prost. God, I hate Hamilton so much. Ugh.
I'm genuinely shocked that I'm the only one who's made references so far.
Dude, I'm in the zone, man. I'm thinking about Wallachian politics in the 15th century right now.
You're the one who made the rules, motherfucker!
I know, but... So...
Shut up!
So anyways, he was either he was born when his dad was still living in Transylvania, in which case he would have been born in the city of Sigashara, I think it's pronounced. Sigashara?
And I'm guessing we've got no hard dates.
No, it's sometime between 1429 and 1432.
3-ish years? That's not a bad timeline, all things considered.
Yeah, but even so if he was born in 1429 or 1430, he would have been born in Sigoshara in Transylvania. If he was born in 1431 or 1432, he would have been born in the capital of Wallachia, Targovishte, because that's when his dad would already have been in power. We know nothing about his life or what he was like before he was taken hostage by the Ottomans. We know nothing about him.
Is this similar to that? Is this similar to what they did with Alexander, where they had they raised them properly as it was like a hostage almost in name only? Like, remember?
Yes. Most of the time that he and Radu were in captivity in the Ottoman Empire, that's basically how they lived. They were basically treated as nobility. They were raised with a proper education. They had a house and free time.
There was a term for that, was right?
I don't know if there's a proper term. I've always just seen it referred to as a.
I remember you mentioned it in a specific way that time, but yeah, it was more like they had a lot more freedom than we think of as political hostages now.
Yeah, and the Japanese warlord that we covered. I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. But he kind of had the same upbringing as well. Tokugawa, yeah.
How do I remember our subjects' names better than you?
No,
I have a shit memory.
You remember the Japanese subject's name better than me.
Fuck you! Fuck you! I resent your insinuation, sir.
My insinuation that you're a weeb? We already know. We've already established that. That's not an insinuation. That's like insinuating that George Washington was the first president.
Or that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself.
Anyways, so yeah, he and Radu were, generally speaking, raised as like nobility. They had a house. They had freedom to come and go as they wanted. They were tutored. He learned when he was growing up. He learned not just his own native Romanian, but he also learned Latin and Turkish and a little bit of Arabic. The main issue was eventually. So generally speaking, they were raised in luxury. There were a few issues, though. For one thing, there's some circumstantial evidence, but it wouldn't be surprising, but there is some circumstantial evidence that both Vlad and Radu were pretty consistently, sexually abused while they were in captivity. Because in amongst the Ottoman...
Damn, it was the Catholics again.
No, this time it was the Muslims.
It would have been a perfect time to make that reference. Little Timmy glued to your crotch.
Yeah, little Vlad glued to your crotch. Little Radu.
That doesn't count because we've already made that reference.
But in the Ottoman Empire, the nobility, they practiced, do you know what pederasty is?
I'm assuming some form of pedophilia because it sounds like pedo.
Yes, but it's a form of institutionalized pedophilia.
That sounds disgusting.
Yeah, so it's something that dates back to ancient Greece and the Muslims in general, after from the Middle Ages onward, a lot of their, even though they were their own thing, a lot of their philosophy and their political ideas and social ideas were very heavily influenced by Greek philosophy. And the ancient Greeks had this practice called pederasty, where somebody would send their kid off, their son, to be tutored by some great philosopher. And in exchange for teaching this kid all about philosophy and rhetoric and literature and mathematics and all this kind of stuff, he would basically, the son would basically be like a sex slave. Look at this shit.
maybe we shouldn't have made Hellsing a rule. But hey-ho.
I didn't expect you to have a list open.
You underestimate my autism, sir.
So yeah, there's a very strong possibility that that both Vlad and Radu were...
We won't make this...
I'm just having flashes of quotes from Hellsing Ultimate.
This is why we shouldn't have made that the shot rule, but fuck it.
So yeah, it is very likely that both Vlad and Radu were sexually assaulted through most of their captivity. And then, in 1444, Pope Eugene IV declared a crusade against the Ottoman Empire, and several armies from across Europe came under the command of King Vladislav, and Vlad II, thought this crusade was going places, so he wanted to get back in Hungary's good graces, so he betrayed the Ottomans while his sons were still hostages.
Fuck them kids!
That's basically what he said.
Yeah.
Somebody pointed out to him that Murad would kill his hostage sons, so he replied, quote, "Then they will be butchered for the sake of Christian peace."
My man really said fuck them kids!
He said fuck them kids. Luckily for our story, neither of them were killed. They were abused, though.
I mean, could you imagine how history would be different without Vlad the Impaler?
No Dracula. Well, actually, as we'll get to...
Well, I'm assuming, like, the timeline probably wouldn't be all that different. It's just... Pop culture would be probably vastly different, because I don't see us having, like, as many of our monsters, at least the same way we do. Like our traditional...
Yeah. Gothic horror would be very... It might have just been a flash in the pan. Like, it'd have one big spark with Frankenstein, and then...
Who knows if Frankenstein even exists without Dracula, though?
Well, Frankenstein was before Dracula.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, Frankenstein was like the 1840s, and Dracula came out in 1897.
Okay.
Yeah, that surprised me, too. I didn't realize that Dracula came out that late. I knew it was Victorian, but I thought it was earlier. I thought it was like the 1860s.
So, funny story. In college, I got bonus points for going to, like... They were basically having, like, a liberal arts at UCO. Like, they were doing, like, mini speech... Like, not literally speeches, but they were presenting basically a paper that they had each did. And they did one on Mary Shelley and her Penny Dreadfuls. And they didn't cover Frankenstein or, like, the ones we know. But they were talking about, like... The disposable literature at the time of, like, Penny Dreadfuls were like it's their, like, slop, like, at the time, like, and Mary Shelley did a lot of slop.
Yeah, it was like their pulp. That's neat. I bet that was a lot of fun.
I don't remember a whole lot, but it was enlightening to know that Mary Shelley was kind of fucked up, because...
Oh, yeah.
Didn't she masturbate on her husband's grave?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, she was not a healthy woman.
No.
But thank God we had unhealthy people like Mary Shelley and Edgar Allan Poe and Bram Stoker to give us gothic horror.
I mean, I fucking love gothic horror. Like, I don't know that we would have, like, I question what horror would look like without those inspirations, because, like, I'm not sure it would look like anything like we recognize today.
And you know what? While we're at it, thank God that... I'm going to regret saying this. Thank God that...
Clip this shit.
Thank God that H.P. Lovecraft's mom was so abusive and sheltering.
Thank H.P. Lovecraft for making her son a racist and dying later in life so he wouldn't be able to have a redemption arc.
Damn. I bet if he had managed to write it...
That's what you're implying.
Basically, yeah. So, anyways... another thing to mention is during their captivity, Vlad III would become a very hardcore Christian. Like, even though he was raised by Ottomans, basically, he did not like Ottomans, he did not like Islam, he was a staunch Christian, and he made it known to everybody that he met. His younger brother Radu, being raised, he'd come into this kind of younger... All that he had ever known his entire life was Ottoman culture. And so he became very sort of inured to it. And so by the time that he was grown, he was very influenced by the culture. He wore their dress and things like that. And he eventually even converted to Islam.
Wow.
And so Vlad the Impaler, the famous Christian ruler.
So Vlad saw his brother as a fucking heathen?
He did, yeah. After he returned to Wallachia, he hated his brother. Because his brother stayed behind and he basically saw his brother as not only a traitor to God, but like a puppet of the Ottomans. Which is kind of funny considering the stuff that he would do when he was in power, but we'll get to that. So anyways, so that crusade that I mentioned, the crusade in 1444 ended in total disaster. The Crusader army was nearly completely destroyed at the Battle of Varna, and the king of Hungary, Vladislav, disappeared. Now, I don't say he was killed at the Battle of Varna, because nobody saw him get killed.
So what you're saying is he went full yellow belly and ran away?
No, he didn't run away. The last time he was seen was in the middle of battle. Nobody saw him die. Nobody saw him get captured. The Ottomans never captured him. He just poofed out of existence. They never found his body. In all likelihood, he was probably killed during the battle, but they never found his body. Nobody ever took credit for killing him. He just disappeared, which I think that's really weird, because, if his body was there, then it would have been found, and somebody would have, one of the Ottoman soldiers who won the battle would have, taken his head or something.
So what you're saying is he wasn't a coward. What most likely happened is people hated him so fucking much they decided to fuck with his corpse enough that it was never recognized?
No, because even if people fucked with his corpse, they would have bragged about it. And we would have gotten something from that. Nobody ever saw him after the battle. So, anyways, Vladislav's young son was elected king of Hungary, and because he was still a minor, John Hunyadi was made regent until he was old enough to rule. So, after this terrible loss...
Double sip, because that counts.
That's not of Wallachia.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, this is of Hungary. Anyways, after that loss, Vlad II came, with his tail between his legs, came back to pledge his allegiance to Sultan Murad once again, and he bent the knee. And so his kids weren't killed.
I'm a real bitch!
I'm not particularly sure why, but after Vlad II pledged allegiance, once again pledged allegiance to the Ottomans, Murad ended up releasing Dracula and Radu and allowed them to return to Wallachia. We're not really sure why.
That is kind of weird.
What his decision making was, but they were released and they were allowed to go free.
Maybe he figured he'd just beat him into submission at that point.
Maybe there had to be a political motivation for it, but I couldn't tell you what exactly. Either way, though, they were only back.
Records are fairly incomplete, right?
Fairly incomplete is an understatement. Yeah, people weren't for some reason writing about this shit back then.
Oh, I wonder why. Keep the uneducated for good reason.
So, shortly after the two sons got back to Wallachia, John Hunyadi decided that he'd had enough of backstabbing from Vlad II, and he invaded Wallachia. During this invasion, Vlad II was overthrown by boyars that were loyal to Hunyadi, and he was murdered in a swamp.
Sip.
That is a sip, yes. We've had more shots than sips.
Not by much.
Not by much, but the fact that... Fuck, dude.
You're the one who wrote the rules!
I wouldn't expect you to react to the rules like this.
Sir, it's Hellsing Ultimate Abridged.
I know, but... So, after...
You should have known better.
So, after Vlad II was killed, Hunyadi put Dracula's cousin, this guy named Vladislav. For some reason, that Vladislav is not the only name he was known by. You want to know what the other name he was known by was?
Tell me.
Dan.
Fucking Dan?
His name was Dan.
Was this man a hater? I'm going somewhere. Was this man a hater?
I don't know. We don't know shit about Dan.
I want to think he's like Dan Versus, and he just fucking hates everything. Did you ever watch that show?
No idea what you're talking about.
Oh my god, that we need to start our Wednesday, fucking Discord watch night. Dan Versus was, oh my... Literally, each week they would pick a new topic, and the main character, Dan was just, who was literally a hater, would just, conspiracy theorist hater bullshit, but he was right every fucking time.
Jesus. All right, we'll give it a shot.
I'm telling you, if you do not enjoy Dan versus, we might have to reconsider our friendship.
Okay.
It's fun bullshit.
So, after Dan came to power, Dracula and Radu were forced to flee back to the Ottoman Empire. But now that Dracula's dad is dead, this is when the younger Vlad could really step into the limelight. This is when we really start to know more about him, because this is when he starts doing shit.
This is where he grows a set of balls?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, this is because...
metaphorically and literally.
Now, we don't know for sure, but there's a lot of stories about Vlad that a lot of the shit that he ended up doing, and part of the reason why he was broken, wasn't just because of his captivity, but also because he was, for his entire life, extraordinarily enraged at the people who killed his dad, and it was also his older brother, the firstborn son of Vlad II, was also killed in that swamp. And I
mean, that has to be a sucky place to die, dying in a fucking swamp.
Dying in a fucking swamp. Well, I don't know if...
What are you doing in me swamp?
What are you doing in my swamp?
Did you hear all that bullshit with the new Shrek movie that's supposed to come out?
There's a new Shrek movie. Just let dead things die.
I think it's Shrek the fifth Shrek.
Let dead things die.
So... they released artwork, and everyone fucking hated it because they changed the art style a lot. And then they delayed it because they were going to change the art style. And then it got delayed even further because people started speculating. And they didn't announce why it got delayed even further because they put like a specific date on the delay, and then they just did an indefinite thing. People just kind of like, what is the most generic plot line they could do? Oh, daughter is interested in so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. Basically, the dumbest, easiest plot ever. Dad can't accept that daughter is old enough to date. Bullshit.
And they nailed it on the head.
So, there's been no confirmation, but when they had to, they put an indefinite delay on it after that, I tend to go with it.
So, late in 1448, Dan and Hunyadi went on campaign to the west around Serbia, which meant that Dan was not in Wallachia. So, Vlad III, Dracula, took this opportunity and went to Murad asking for a small Ottoman army so that he could retake Wallachia and make himself voivod as an Ottoman puppet like his dad had been. Murad agreed, and Vlad occupied the capital of Wallachia, Targovishte, in September of 1448, which made him, and he was crowned, for the first time, he was crowned voivod of Wallachia.
You said first time? Does he get dethroned several times or some shit?
Literally next sentence.
Well, that's a sip.
That is a sip. Okay, so almost as soon as Vlad took power, rebellions started popping up from boyars that were loyal to Hungary. Boyars all across.
I would have never guessed.
Yeah, it's, that's just what happened in Wallachia. That's just every time that happened. And then right after that, Dan and Hunyadi got their asses kicked at the Battle of Kosovo and were kicked out of Serbia. And so Dan brought the remnants of his army back to Wallachia and ended up kicking Dracula back out of Wallachia. And so he's forced back into exile in the Ottoman Empire. And his first rule as voivod of Wallachia lasted about 2 months.
This man ruled for 2 months before getting dethroned?
Yes. Okay, so yeah. Dracula has found himself once again in exile in the Ottoman Empire. But, luckily for us, Wallachian politics at this time is a revolving door, so this isn't going to be the end of his story. So Vlad spent a few years trying to...
I am, at the risk of making us take another shot, do you think he ever wrote his replacement a letter?
That's right. I'm going to fuck the fear turkey.
Dear Chief Replacement, I wanted to send you this friendly little letter to inform you of your imminent demise. If you're curious about the frequency of which I've sent these letters, it is merely to instill as much fear as I can, as if basting a turkey, which that I will proceed to have sex with. That's right! I'm going to fuck the fear turkey! Follow me on Twitter at the Crimson Fucker. Sincerely, Alucard.
Follow me on Twitter at the Crimson Fucker.
Cheers! I actually followed that. He hasn't made a post since 2022 or 2023. I think the last post, if I'm gonna click on the link, is about the Queen's death.
Oh well, he probably got.
I think it is.
Yeah, he probably got sad when she died and killed himself.
R.I.P. the Lay of the Century, September 8th, 2022. I'm gonna look that up. September 8th, 2022. Because I'm curious if that is when the Queen died, because I can't remember. Yeah, it's the death of the Queen.
Yeah, I think I was in the break room at the vape shop, at the first vape shop that I worked at when I read about that. I think that's when we were trying to.
I have no idea whether I was, because the Queen's death didn't register for me.
I think that was right in the middle of when we were first getting the podcast set up too.
You cut out. What was that first? What?
Wait, no, it would have been okay. It was, 2022. Okay, so we just started doing the podcast when that happened.
Yeah, that was year one of the podcast, I want to say.
Yeah, and we started in January, right? I think. January, February. February, yeah. So yeah, that would have been right after we started doing the podcast.
Yeah, we would have been about a little over 6 months in. Well, just under, actually, because September is the 9th month. No, just over, because, yeah, it would have been our 7th month on the podcast.
So, Vlad, while he was in exile, he spent a few years trying to find allies, both in the Ottoman Empire. He went and saw the Sultan a couple times, trying to get his help to get back in power. He went to Moldavia, where his cousin was in power, and tried to get his help. But this was really difficult, especially in Moldavia, because every time he would try to find an ally, the guy that he was talking to would immediately be murdered and replaced with somebody else.
Damn, revolving door much?
Revolving door, yeah. We aren't entirely sure what all he was up to during this time, but he must have eventually ended up in Hungary, where somehow he managed to convince John Hunyadi to put his support back behind him. So in 1456, he marched into Wallachia at the head of an army that Hunyadi had given him and killed his cousin Dan in battle. According to legend, he actually they fought in one-on-one combat, and he killed his cousin.
What you're saying is he went mano a mano with his cousin and fucking marked that guy?
According to the stories, yeah. And so, once again...
I mean, if you're gonna take over a country, that's a badass way to do it.
Yeah. And so, once again, he was crowned the Voivod of Wallachia. This is where Vlad's legend begins to be made. Because during this time, he realized that one of his primary problems with ruling Wallachia was the outsized power and influence that the boyars had, the nobility. If a small faction of boyars didn't like the voivod, then they could destabilize the country enough by rebelling that even if they weren't a threat on their own, a stronger power, either the Ottomans or Hungary, could come in and overthrow him. And so he identified that the only way to keep himself in power was to keep the boyars under his boot.
How'd that turn out for him?
When he took power the second time, he started a reign of blood.
Well, I mean, it's the guy who inspired Dracula. I figured blood was left, right, and center.
Yeah, this is when the blood starts flowing, really flowing.
Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
Have you ever heard that song by Slayer? No, it's not Slayer. It might be Slayer. It's called Raining Blood.
Maybe. I know songs as in lyrics. I don't know songs in who the fuck did them most of the time.
Okay, that's the issue, because Raining Blood is one of the greatest metal tracks of all time. And it's I think it's the only metal track I've ever heard in my life that doesn't have vocals. It's just instrumental. It's really good.
Yeah, I don't do instrumentals well. Too much time in like band. If I'm listening to a song like on my personal time, I want to have lyrics, and that's just one of the things from being a band nerd for too long.
Yeah, I like my songs to have stories, which is why I like concept albums so much. Is I like songs to have stories to them.
I also really like older westerns when they're literally telling a story. Like, I really love those songs, like Big John, Big Iron, Wolverton Mountain.
Other various songs with the word "big" in the title.
I didn't mean to mention as many songs like that with "big" in the title, but like,
you should check out Coulter Wall. He's really good.
I think I've listened to some of his stuff. I really like him. He just doesn't have a big like portfolio.
He's gotten pretty big. Like he has a.
Last time I looked into his music, it wasn't very big. Let me put it that way.
Okay, yeah, he's put out like that must have been a while ago because he's put out like several albums. So, but his album is it Sleeping on the Blacktop? I think it's Sleeping on the Blacktop. It's whatever album that song is from. Sleeping on the Blacktop is really good. He has this hell yeah. So, upon taking power, Dracula began his reign of blood.
Did we take a sip for that one? For him taking power back?
Oh, we hadn't yet, no.
Sip. I love how we've taken in definitely more liquor than beer this episode. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, audience. We might become deranged.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a very lopsided episode. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm off tomorrow. You're the one who works tomorrow.
Well, I just meant like how off topic we might get, like, or like how distracted, like how drunk we get, like devolves the episode is what I'm apologizing to the audience for.
So, Dracula began rounding up boyars who had participated. The first people he targeted were the boyars who participated in the murder of his father and his brother. That was his first target.
Good old-fashioned revenge. Good choice.
He had them rounded up and publicly executed.
As one does.
Yeah. Some of them were flayed. Some of them were dismembered. Some of them were boiled alive.
Gotta get a little variety in there. Gotta get the variety.
Yeah, a few of them were boiled alive. You know, put them in a big cauldron, turn up the heat. They turn into a lobster. A few of them, though.
Love it.
It's so good. It's so fun. So, anyways, so a few of these people, the ones that he especially like personally hated, he had them. So let me explain. He had them impaled. These were his first
3 sips.
These were his first impalements. Yeah, we'll go and sip.
I would say that's technically more than 3, but you're not specifying a number.
Yeah, I meant like every individual instance that it's mentioned.
Well, you're saying right now he's killing his enemies.
In this case, like I'm in every time that it's mentioned that he impales a group of people.
Gotcha. Oh, so there's not any like one impalement. It's just a group of impalements.
He does it. There's a lot of instances of it happening. He always does it in groups of people, but there's multiple instances of it.
Gotcha.
So the people he especially hated were impaled. Let me explain what impalement actually involved. And this is going to get a little graphic, so for our audience,
It's not just like stabbing you with a stake impalement.
No. Oh, God, no. That would have been a mercy.
I assumed. That would have been too easy for Vlad.
So, a sharpened stake would be planted in the ground, and the pointy bit of the stake at the top would be covered in grease.
In grease?
In grease. So that it was...
This sounds like it's probably painful.
So the still living victim...
Extra painful.
Extra painful, yes. the still living victim would be placed on top of the stake, usually by their rectum.
Owie!
And then their limbs would be tied off to the ground or to the base of the stake so that there was pressure pulling them down.
Sounds like someone didn't believe in safe words.
And so over the course of days, the pressure pulling them down would be gradually tightened so that very slowly they would be pulled down and the stake would be pushed through their body, through up all the way through their torso until it came out the top. And this would be a process.
At that point, bite your own tongue off and die that way.
There were a lot of people that would be killed immediately because of if they were older people, which, he did this to a lot of older people, the pain within the first few hours would kill them. But for younger people who are a little bit more sturdy, this process could take several days. And there were accounts of some...
It sounds excruciatingly... this sounds like the kind of torture that you should kill yourself before you experience the full might.
There were accounts of some people that for some reason the stake would just happen to miss all of their or would kind of push all of their vital organs out of the way. And so they'd have the stake coming out of their neck. They'd be pulled down so far that it'd be coming out of their neck and they'd still be alive and moving around.
How in the actual fuck do you survive that shit? I understand the mechanics, but fucking...
Human bodies are fucking weird. The way the human bodies work is that you have a few very specific spots of your body where all of your life is, and if those places are hit, you immediately die. But you can sustain an enormous amount of trauma to the rest of your body, and as long as those parts are intact, you're still alive.
Yeah, the human body makes no sense sometimes. I get you.
It's fascinating, but terrible at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, this is what Vlad the Impaler's this is what his impalements looked like. And this, because of stories of him doing this...
I never imagined it was like that. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
That's excruciating.
So after his death, because of these stories of him doing this, he would receive the name, or the nickname, Vlad Tepish.
Yep.
Which is Romanian for Vlad the Impaler.
I love how a lot of modern media calls Vlad Tepish or Vlad the Impaler Tepish, but they never go into what Tepish means, so they just think that's that's just his last name. It doesn't mean nothing. I mean, a lot of names do mean shit, but they don't get into it it has a deep meaning. But that's fucked.
Yeah. For the longest time, before I started reading for the research for the script, I actually thought Tepish was his family name.
Damn. I mean, I felt like there was too much media around that name for it to be an actual name. But I figured there was a reason why that showed up, and it does make sense because it's just Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepish.
Yeah, but Tepish is just Romanian for the Impaler. So yeah, that was his first recorded instance of impaling his enemies. Was both the men and the
psychopath's first impalement.
The men and the family of these men who were responsible for his dad and his brother's murder, they were the ones that were his first victims of impalement. And promise me you...
obviously, we looking back at it, it's an insane thing. But if you were him in the moment, hell yeah, you killed my father. Fuck you, die a horrible death.
Yeah, and there's something else that I really wanted to talk about this subject was, this is an area of the world. This is just a geographical area that has suffered so much trauma in their recent history. All I've talked about so far has been just constant invasions and civil wars of this one tiny strip of land.
Oh yeah, they've been fucked over left, right, and center.
It's no surprise that this place would end up producing a guy like this, because...
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised in the least bit.
Every single person who lived in Wallachia in this era knew violence intimately. They saw it every day. It was almost like a major invasion was almost like a yearly occurrence for them.
Hello, darkness, my old friend, kind of thing.
Yeah, it just happened all the time, and it's no wonder that it would end up producing a guy like this.
They went so blind to like political machinations like that, like we have to police violence.
Yeah, like we as a country are so accustomed to violence. Here, in the modern day, 2025 United States, we are so accustomed to violence.
School shooters, law enforcement murders, not accidental killings like everyone likes to frame it. Those are murders.
Yeah, we've just become so accustomed to it that it becomes background noise at a certain.
Yep.
And it takes a really extreme escalation to really become noteworthy. And that's the same kind of thing that's...
And I fucking hate that we're there. I hear it right now.
Yeah.
But it's our reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. But here's the thing. This... We really can't just think of this as think of these as revenge killings by Dracula. Because they weren't just revenge killings. They were practical.
No, I assumed when you mentioned it, so Vlad he's never struck me as the kind of guy who would just, oh, you killed my father, prepare to die, in whatever his name is from Princess Diaries kind of thing.
Inigo Montoya.
Sorry, I am drunk enough that I could not pronounce that. I figured it served a further purpose. It wasn't just because, I don't think he would have gone out of his way to do this shit if they had just killed his father, to be perfectly honest. Maybe this speaks to, sending a message at the level, no, I didn't just kill... They just killed my father. This was personal. This was more than that, is what it seemed like. It felt like it served more than one purpose.
Yeah, because... Yeah, the purpose that this served was that Vlad identified something that a lot of other voivods had not. And that was that the primary tool that the outside powers, like Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, were using in order to destabilize Wallachia and turn it into this proxy battlefield was the boyars. It was the nobility. They could be swayed more easily than a lot of these voivods could. And they had a lot of power in Wallachia. And so if the voivod wanted to stay in power, he had to keep the boyars in an iron grip. And so this was the first step in that. He had to terrify the boyars. He had to make sure that the boyars knew that if they stepped out of line for even a fucking second, they would suffer the most unimaginably painful death that they could possibly imagine, and more. And not just them, but their wives, their children, their extended family would all become victims of this as well. And he did that regularly. It wasn't just the men.
Yeah, no. Everything that I've heard about Vlad the Impaler, it seemed like he had shit on lock. If you fucked up, you were going to have to pay the price. He wasn't gonna. He made examples of shit.
Yeah, and so overnight, as soon as he came to power the second time, he turned Wallachia from an elective monarchy into an absolute dictatorship that was ruled by fear. He was, in a lot of ways, I kind of think of Vlad as he was the first modern dictator.
I mean, in all media, Vlad the Impaler is, obviously it's through the lens of Dracula, he is a dictator in every sense of the word.
Yeah, he really was. In a lot of ways, he pioneered what a dictator is. In the modern sense. Because he had to think in ways, in a lot of ways, this is this little backwater country of Wallachia.
This is setting the format.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this little backwater country of Wallachia was kind of a...
template, not format.
Yeah, this Wallachia in the 1400s kind of ended up becoming like the testing ground for what like a modern, like in this transition from the medieval era into the early modern era. This was the testing ground for what an absolute dictator would look like going into the modern era, all the way up to today. A lot of the DNA of the modern dictator is being formed right here in the impalement of 1453, I think, yeah. 1456. This is when the idea of a dictator ruling by fear really gets invented. I think that's really important to kind of keep in mind, because I think that that's going to become a major theme when he turns into like a supernatural monster in like modern like literary culture.
Well, at this point, like we're so imbibed in it that we kind of forget how different it was at the time. Because like this, like yes, history is dark and bleak and whatever, but like doing things out and out laissez-faire like this was not the norm.
Yeah, this was a really unique and new thing that Vlad was doing. This isn't something that kings typically did. Like, you had tyrannical kings in the past in medieval Europe. This was something that was uniquely modern. This is
I think that's inspired our like Vlad probably inspired our view of like even like in historical media of tyrannical kings, because like even when we had like tyrannical kings, they didn't sit around, they didn't last long enough to get where they were depicted in media, or at the very least they weren't as effective as is portrayed in media.
right, yeah. Yeah, and so just because of the place and time, this sort of, because this is a very new thing. Like this sort of situation that happened before, but this is such a staple of the modern world, that this one tiny nation being stuck between two great powers and becoming like a proxy, eventually producing like a dictatorial power that ruled by fear, is it's so stereotypical of the modern world. Like, you see that in modern countries today, and it's really being born right here. And the tactics that are used by modern dictators are being pioneered by Vlad right here. And I think that's really important for keeping in mind, like, why there is such a strong connection between the idea of vampires in modern literary culture, and the idea of like political tyrants, and the idea of like, yeah, the idea of,
Oh yeah, like I've never like we've never like sat down and self-examined this, me and you, but like it makes total sense that this is where it was born and that they're so inextricably linked.
yeah, I think that's just like, I really think that that's what the idea, because the folklore around vampires in Eastern Europe that kind of inspired like the modern Dracula are so heavily inspired by, like, especially in areas of Eastern Europe that were controlled by like very powerful authoritarian states in like the early and mid modern period. And that's why we kind of have this idea of dictatorial leaders and dictatorial powers being bloodsuckers. We imagine the vampire as being a tyrant in like the most personal and intimate form, and I think that's really being born in the identity of Vlad the Impaler in this moment.
Oh, 100%. Definitely.
And that is so endlessly fascinating to me. Like this staple that we kind of take for granted as this part of the modern world is that if a tyrannical, like if a politician gets too powerful and they get too much control of the levers of power, they end up becoming just bloodsuckers who suck the life from their people that they rule.
You know what I'd really like to see, and I'm not the kind of person that would probably like for fun read like a doctoral thesis or whatever. I would like to see a doctoral thesis written on the connection towards modern authoritarianism, dictatorship, and Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like a like a sort of sociological genealogy between the impalement of the boyars in 1456 and like modern crimes of political dictatorship. I mean, even in the same region of the country, like the reign of terror of I mean, shit, even Ceausescu, the dictator of Romania under like behind the Iron Curtain, like a lot of the shit that he did, or like a lot of the violence that was inflicted on in Yugoslavia by Slobodan Milosevic. Like there is a direct line from Vlad Tepes impaling the boyars in 1456 in Targovishta. There's a direct line from that to like the massacres of Srebrenica, and that is a fascinating connection that I would love to read more into and explore.
10 years from now, we're gonna look at this episode, and we decided on your doctoral thesis right here and now, Derek.
No, I'm probably not. If I get to that level, I'm probably not going to study genocide, like genocide studies. It's
And you're saying there's not gonna be a connection on this?
no, because I'm more interested in like cultural osmosis. That's kind of my area of like more my area of interest. Like the way that people perceive themselves and kind of develop cultures based on like their material conditions and things like that. But this would be just a fucking fascinating thing.
I hope one day someone does do a doctoral thesis on that, because like again, I'm not normally the person who'd read a doctoral thesis, but like I would read the shit out of that.
So here, let me find.
I am the master of derailment.
So yeah, so later on in 1456, John Hunyadi would die, and shortly after that, Hunyadi's son Ladislaus Hunyadi would become the new regent of Austria-Hungary. It was a title he was called the Captain General of Hungary. That's what John Hunyadi was, and that's what his son Ladislaus would become. And Ladislaus didn't like Vlad.
I can't imagine why.
And to be fair, John Hunyadi didn't like Vlad either, but he was at least willing to work with him on occasion. Ladislaus was not. Ladislaus saw him as nothing but a filthy traitor and an Ottoman puppet. So Ladislaus started supporting rival claimants to the Wallachian throne. Some of these pretenders were being hosted by nobles in Transylvania, which was the western part of what like modern-day Romania, that was controlled by Hungary. And there were some of these guys that were. This is really interesting. There was in Transylvania. There was a population of Germans that had migrated to Transylvania a few generations before. They were called the Transylvanian Saxons, and they were fiercely loyal to the Hungarian throne. Have you ever, just as a side tangent, real quick, have you ever heard of the Pied Piper?
Yes, but I don't know like why it's called that or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, there is a folk tale originating from around this era in central Germany about the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper was this idea of this man who would come into a German town in central Germany, and he would play this tune on his flute that would cause all of the local wildlife to follow him, and he would then leave, and he'd take all the wildlife with him, all the animals, including all of the cattle
See,
and stuff.
the one I'm aware of was the children. Like, would the Pied Piper come in,
Yeah.
play his tune, and lead the children away?
Yeah, there's a couple different versions. There's the animals, there's the children. I guess the children one is the more famous one, but yeah. So the Pied Piper would come into town. He'd play his flute, and either the animals or the children would follow him. And this was based loosely on some events that happened in Germany shortly after the Black Plague in the 1300s. So in the aftermath of the Black Plague, there was a huge shortage of labor in Eastern Europe, because Eastern Europe was hit especially hard by the Black Plague, and especially in Transylvania and in Hungary. And so in the aftermath, a lot of Hungarian nobles went to Germany in the Holy Roman Empire to recruit local peasants from Germany to go and migrate and settle in Eastern Europe in order to become peasants and work the land for basically like better terms than they would get from nobility in Germany. And so there was basically like an entire generation of young people who were kind of lured in by this offer, who then migrated to Eastern Europe. And when they got to Eastern Europe, they became a big chunk of them became the Transylvanian Saxons. Back in Germany, this event of like an entire generation of German youth in central Germany basically leaving led to this story, like this folk story of the Pied Piper who came and used his wily, like magical musical skills to lure all the children away from the village, and it left them destitute and impoverished. And so that's kind of like there's a connection between like the settlement of the Transylvanian Saxons and the story of the Pied Piper there. I thought that was really interesting when I was reading about it.
I mean, it gives you more context on that story, because, like, I didn't ever get any context, like, in that sense on that story. Like, I just knew of, like, the folk tale kind of, whatever you want to call that, behind it. Not, like, the historical context or why that came about.
Yeah, so, anyways, so these Germans who settled in Transylvania would eventually become like a whole sort of like minority community within Transylvania in like Greater Hungary. And they had their own nobility. They had their own cities that they kind of established, their own like large towns and villages. And they had their own nobility, their own burghers, like basically like their sort of ruling caste. And they were fiercely loyal to the Hungarian throne. And during this time that we're talking about, some of the pretenders to the Wallachian throne were being housed and kind of taken care of, being protected by these Transylvanian Saxons, these German minority, in towns like Brezhov and Sabia. Shortly after John Hunyadi died in 1457, Ladislaus Hunyadi had a falling out with the new king of Hungary, who was confusingly also named Ladislaus. He was Ladislaus V. And Ladislaus V had Hunyadi Jr. executed.
Shit.
And so Hunyadi's mom, who was John Hunyadi's widow, this woman named Elizabeth Zilagi, I think that's how it's pronounced, Zilagi, I'll just say Zilagi. Elizabeth Zilagi stirred up a rebellion in Hungary and went into civil war, which later on she would eventually win, and Ladislaus Hunyadi's younger brother Matthias would be elected king. But during the civil war, Vlad took advantage of it and invaded Transylvania, which was controlled by Hungary. And he had a small army, and he plundered most of the biggest Saxon villages of Brasov and Sibiu. And he killed dozens of men, women, and children, hauling them back to Wallachia and impaling them. So I think it's another 3 sips.
Yes, that's 3 sips. Beer number 3, opening now.
So the reason that Vlad did this was both For one, he wanted to compel the Saxons to stop protecting one of his political rivals. This political rival being Dan, another guy named Dan. It's not the same Dan as before. It's a different Dan.
Dan versus.
And he also wanted to ingratiate himself with the Zalagi rebels, because he knew immediately, like, he had strong political instincts, and he knew that as soon as they rebelled, they were going to win. And so he wanted to ingratiate himself with them as soon as possible. And so they eventually won, and since he had gone and raided these guys that were loyal to the previous king of Hungary, they saw him as like one of their allies. And so he had so that now these guys who were winners and basically ruled over Hungary now, he had a very strong, intimate connection with them now. And so after the Civil War ended, the Transylvanian Saxons and the Zalagis would go into peace negotiations, and Vlad would be involved in these negotiations. And so the Saxons agreed to kick the pretender, this guy named Dan, out. And Vlad would allow the Saxons to trade with Wallachian merchants. That was kind of the trade-off. This peaceful relationship he had with the Saxons did not last very long. You know, if you can believe it, you know, Vlad the Impaler, peaceful relations, not exactly a winning bet. So eventually rumors started to fly around that officials in Brashov were seizing shipments from Wallachian merchants without compensation. So basically a Wallachian merchant would come in this specific case, they would come in, they'd buy a bunch of steel, and they'd try to take the steel back to Wallachia, but when they got to the border guard would seize all of their steel and then refuse to compensate them. That was the rumor anyway. We don't know if it actually happened. But the rumor was enough that Vlad took action, and he seized a few Saxon merchants that were active in Wallachia at the time, and he took all of their property, he tortured them, and then he impaled them.
That tracks. 36.
So, after this happened, the Saxons, back in Brashov, they didn't like this, understandably. They felt like they were, okay, so Vlad is now persecuting Saxons. So now we have to be against Vlad again. And so they started supporting the pretender that they had kicked out before, the guy named Dan. And Dan was able to raise an army and invaded Wallachia in 1460 in order to try and overthrow Vlad. In their very first battle that they met between Dan and Vlad, Dan's army was completely wiped out. It ceased to exist.
So Dan got his ass wrecked.
Yeah, he was completely fucked. And he was killed in battle. And so Vlad, after this overwhelming victory, took his army into Transylvania and went to Brashov and Sibiu and just started impaling people. Just even more people. Like anybody he could find, he just started impaling.
As someone named the Impaler would.
Yeah. Yeah, are you telling me that Mr. Impaler would impale people?
Hell yes.
No, I can't believe it. That's incredible.
3 sips.
So, with this last round of impalements, the Saxons got the message and were like, okay, well, either we accept Vlad as our overlord and our dictator, or we get impaled. And so the message was pretty clear. They just became part of Wallachia by that point. So, at this point, Vlad was kind of on a roll. He'd done a lot of shit that a lot of voivods weren't able to do before him. He'd brought the boyars under control, and he'd even gone to the extent of seizing territory from Transylvania by subjugating the Saxons. So he felt like he kind of got a big head. And not only that, but by this point, most of his rivals for power were just fucking dead. Like, he didn't have a lot.
I mean, it sounds like he kicked ass.
Yeah, he's kicking ass right now. He's got Wallachia by the balls. He's on his way to having Transylvania by the balls. he was kind of on a roll. He was doing better than any voivod of Wallachia had done up to this point. He's the first voivod of Wallachia in like 200 years to have like his own independent foreign policy. He could kind of dictate his own terms when he was dealing with other nations. He wasn't subject to anybody else at this point. And that was a really big deal. And he felt like really powerful. And so he decided to try to push his luck. And
as one does.
He wanted to assert his independence a little bit. And so he stopped paying tribute to the Ottomans in 1461.
How did that turn out for him, Derek?
Mixed bag. I'll say mixed bag. The new Ottomans... So, the last Sultan had died. The new Sultan, Mehmed II, heard about this, and he decided, okay, so our dog has to have his leash yanked. So, he sent an envoy to Targovishte in ordering Vlad to come to Constantinople for a chat. And he gave the envoys the secret orders that they obviously weren't going to tell Vlad, but they had orders to arrest Vlad and bring him to Constantinople in chains as soon as he crossed over the Danube. Somehow, we're not sure how, Vlad ended up finding out about this plan and had the envoys arrested, tortured, and killed. They weren't impaled, if that's what you're wondering. They were probably just dismembered.
I assumed normal torture and killing. I figured we would know if it was the impalement.
So, in response to this, he raised his armies, and he invaded Ottoman territory, and he laid waste to the countryside. That's the best way I can describe it. He
went on the warpath?
He did not leave a lot living in the areas that his army went.
No stone unturned?
Yeah, they really went out of their way. And keep in mind, this was an area of the Ottoman Empire that was formerly Bulgaria. Bulgarians still lived there, and Bulgarians were Christian. They weren't Muslim. And he was going through this area, basically burning down every village he came across, burning all of their crops. And he was doing this mainly to Christians, which is really weird because he himself considered himself a Christian. And a lot of these Bulgarians weren't particularly happy with living under Ottoman rule. This never comes up again, but I thought I'd point it out because I thought that was weird. Anyways, during this campaign, he ends up killing hundreds of people and razing, several dozen villages. He just burns to the ground. They just cease to exist.
Sounds like something I would expect from someone named Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah. And then he goes back to Targovishte, and he shoots off a letter to the new king of Hungary, King Matthias, who was a member of that family that he helped in the Civil War. He shot off the letter to Matthias asking for aid, knowing that the Ottomans, as soon as Mehmed II found out about this, they dropped a hammer on Wallachia. It wasn't even a question. So, when Mehmed II found out about this attack, he decided that Vlad had to go. So, he brought his younger brother, Radu, who was still living in the Ottoman Empire at the time. He brought Radu on board, and Radu led the army that invaded Wallachia. And their goal was, 1, kill Vlad, and 2, give Wallachia to Radu. Make Radu the voivod of Wallachia. And so they invaded in June of 1462. And Mehmed, just to show how important this issue was to him, he came along with the army personally, and he was in personal command. This further goes to show how important Vlad was to this whole situation. The fact that Mehmed, because even though this is the center of our story, this was a side story to the whole Ottoman strategy at this point. This was a side tale Mehmed had way more important shit to deal with at this point. But this tiny little backwater Wallachia was so important to his strategic goals, and Vlad was doing such a good job of fucking that up that he felt like he had to be personally involved when they invaded Wallachia. That's how big of a deal Vlad was at this point. He turned this tiny little backwater country of Wallachia into basically like this center of geopolitics between the Christian and Muslim worlds. Just hugely fucking important. That Mehmed himself would feel compelled to join, like personally command the army that invaded this. Like, imagine if China invaded the mainland United States, and the governor of North Dakota was fucking up China's war effort so bad that the president of China felt personally compelled to come to the United States and personally lead armies to invade North Dakota.
So what you're saying is it's the equivalent of, like, North Dakota fucking shit up, and then Xi Jinping decided to be personally involved in the invasion of North Dakota?
Yes. Yeah, imagine a guy who was so personally...
How the fuck did I know that name off the tip of my tongue? Because I don't remember shit like that.
Xi Jinping, yeah. Because he's Pooh Bear. That's the big joke, right? He's Pooh Bear.
You literally cannot find anything Winnie the Pooh related in China because people made memes about him, comparing him to Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's good for Chinese people. I hope that they keep doing shit like that.
So, the invasion is going on.
Yeah. So, Mehmed II found out. So, they invade in June 1462. Mehmed is personally commanding. Vlad knew that he was hugely outnumbered, so he took a scorched earth approach and burned the countryside. So, you know how scorched earth works. As an army is retreating, they burn the countryside so that the army that's invading doesn't have anything to, like, they don't have any, like, crops to live off. Like, they can't scavenge for anything because everything is burned. So you're destroying your own countries to deny the invader the ability to live off the land. That's basically the idea. And this.
Think Sherman's March.
Not quite. Think more like Operation Barbarossa, like the German invasion of Russia. Or actually, I think a better example would be like Napoleon's invasion of Russia. The Russian army refused to engage Napoleon's army as he invaded Russia, and instead just burned all of their own crops, so that as the French army invaded Russia, they would have nothing to eat, and they would all freeze to death. That's the basic idea, except this was in the middle of summer, and what's weird is that even though this is Eastern Europe, this is right on the coast of the Black Sea. It gets pretty hot in Romania in the summer.
From what I understand, a lot of European countries get really fucking hot.
In Southern Europe, yes. Like in Italy and Spain and like parts of France, it can get pretty hot during the summer. In Eastern Europe, it's a little bit more rare, but because Romania is right on the coast of the Black Sea, they get a lot of warm air coming off of like the salt water, and it kind of gives them a very, very hot. And also, Romania is like a naturally very like marshy country, like just in general, and so they have a lot of wetlands, and so it gets very hot in Romania just because there's a lot of water to have heat coming off of. So it's kind of unique as far as Slavic countries go, because even like the Adriatic Sea, like Slavic countries on the Adriatic.
So I just realized it's a Slavic country. So Vlad the Impaler is obviously the inspiration of Dracula and modern day vampirism, but isn't there like historical vampire the Striga? So like very different from our modern context, or I'm misremembering where that Striga comes from.
I'm not sure about the Striga, but
I'm gonna look that up really quick because like Striga it isn't anything close to what we think of as a modern vampire.
all I know is that like the modern idea of the vampire is heavily inspired by Bram Stoker's idea of Dracula. Like Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was heavily inspired by Eastern European folklore about the vampire. So I'm not sure about the Striga, but the vampire is like its own like self-contained mythology, especially in Eastern Europe, but to some extent also in Central and Western Europe.
Okay, no, so sorry. Striga is one of the terms for witch.
Okay. Yeah, the witch has its own fucking long history in Eastern Europe. That,
Well, so no, I've for a little bit, Lore Lodge did a couple episodes on like going into the historical. I think they did vampire and witches, and they went into like here is all the different like umbrella terms that we have. Like here's what they have meant and what they were contextually back in the time. The history of that, and I must have gotten my wires crossed. And from what I understand, those type of videos were some of their lower performing, but like it is so informative. Like they go over the history of the vampire. Like, okay, what are all historical like monsters like throughout history in different places that were clearly vampires, but they're not matching our current modern day like term, quote unquote. And like how did things like basically tracking the metamorphosis of modern day vampires, and it was really good, and like I genuinely would like you to like check it out and like see your thoughts because like it's the amount of research that has to go into some of their episodes, especially that, is insane.
I've been watching a little bit of the YouTube channels you've been.
I know I've recommended Wendigoon, Lore Lodge, and those are the major two that I've recommended you watch.
I've been watching a lot of Wendigoon.
I love Wendigoon shit. Like, just I one like if we ever get a Patreon, like we need to watch his coverage of the Sky King and just like your impression of Sky King from what I told you versus how Wendigoon covers it would be an interesting episode.
Yeah. So yeah, Vlad basically was just burning the countryside as the Ottomans were invading. Radu and the Sultan were at the head, and he was burning the countryside to kind of deny them like food to scavenge off. And it was the middle of the summer, so it was hot. They didn't have a lot of like good water sources because Romania is very marshy, and so a lot of the water sources they have are standing water, and standing water is not good for drinking water because standing water, produces is a good breeding ground for bacteria and shit like that. That's how you get diseases.
Why is there a difference between standing water and still water?
No, it's the same thing.
Okay, I was just wondering why you were referring to it that way, but I'm guessing that's just a historical thing, maybe? I don't know.
No, that's always how I like. That's how I'd always sort of refer to it as is like if it's a body of water that isn't running like a river or a creek. If it's just like a lake or a lake or a pond, then that's standing water. That's how I'd always sort of refer to it as.
I don't know. I've never heard any intellectualness behind the discussion of Stillwater. I've just seen like, oh, it's Stillwater, Stillwater. You know what I mean? And it's caused confusion because I grew up near Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I'll see like a video that's talking about Stillwater. I'm like, and the apparentness of the video isn't like it's not readily apparent that they're talking about the literal still water versus the location. So I'll be like, I don't recognize that, but like I don't know Stillwater like the back of my hand, and then I'll be like, oh, they're talking about the thing Stillwater, not the location. I'm like, fuck you.
So yeah, um, so eventually the Ottoman army would push into Wallachia, and they would occupy the capital city of Targovishte. Before they got to Targovishte, um, one night the Ottoman army would be, in camp. They'd be sleeping. Vlad would get the idea to launch. This was like his last-ditch attempt to kind of push back the Ottomans. He led a surprise attack against the Ottoman camp, and he tried to target the camp where the Sultan personally was sleeping. But in the darkness, they ended up getting lost, and they ended up attacking the wrong camp.
Did they attack their own camp?
No, they didn't attack their own camp. But the Ottoman army was so fucking big that they had to camp, and they had several distinct camps because their army was so fucking big. So the camp that they ended up attacking didn't have the Sultan in it. It had a couple of his high-ranking viziers, like his court, court assistants, his chancellors, basically. So they managed to kill a couple of his high-ranking viziers, but they couldn't find the Sultan. And so they kept running around, they were on horseback, they kept running around, they were killing Ottoman soldiers as they attacked. But they couldn't find the Sultan himself. And so when dawn came, because this attack was in the middle of the night, when dawn came, the sun was rising, they decided, okay, well, people are going to start waking up and realizing what's happening. They're going to come and kill us, so we'll go ahead and ditch it. And so they fled. So they caused a lot of chaos, but it was ultimately a strategic defeat because they didn't accomplish what they set out to do. They killed a couple of high-ranking guys, but they didn't accomplish much. This event, I just thought this was cool because this event came to be called the Battle of the Torches, or the Battle of Torches, because it happened in the middle of the night, and so all of the Wallachian soldiers were carrying torches as they rode in to raid this camp in search of the Sultan. I thought that was cool imagery. But this attack was the last-ditch effort to try and push the Ottomans out of Wallachia before they really reached Targovishte. But the Ottomans would eventually reach the capital city. And this would happen in July of 1462. So, when they got there, the entire population of the city had abandoned it before the Ottoman arrived. Basically, the entire population had up and fled because they were afraid that, they were going to be raided. And they were going to suffer the depredations of an occupying army, which involved a lot of theft, murder, sexual assault, that kind of stuff. They wanted to avoid that. That was typical of warfare. Also, before the Ottoman occupation, there were a lot of boyars who claimed to be loyal to Vlad they probably were, that's a thing, but Vlad, he's a dictator.
Well, what I was about to say is they were loyal in the sense of, hey, he's got the most... He is the person prevailing in the time. I'm just going to follow whoever has the power or who is likely to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, basically. But they basically...
Fair weather followers, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on the money. A lot of these boyars basically came to him after that attack on the Ottoman camp, and they basically said it would probably be a good idea if you just made peace with the Ottomans and started paying tribute to them again. That'd probably be better for everybody. But Vlad at this point was, a dictator. And he didn't take too kindly to that. That was defeatism. And more than that, he now saw them as traitors.
I mean, obviously.
And so he ordered the city of Targovishte to abandon their homes and to flee. But on the way out, basically every one of these boyars who had recommended to him to make peace to the Ottomans, he had them their wives, their children. So basically, all of these boyars who had come to him and basically asked, like, do you think it'd be a good idea if we just, conceded Wallachia to the Ottomans and just made peace with them, gave them tribute? You think that'd be a good idea, just to save our country? He saw all of these...
And he lost his ever living mind on them.
Yeah, he lost his fucking shit. And so on his way out of leaving Targovishta, he had all of these boyars impaled. But not just the boyars, but their wives, their children.
Ooh, he went full family.
And their extended family. Basically, like anybody who had a legitimate claim to...
Was even remotely related to them.
Right. He had them all impaled. And he had them impaled on the side of the road of basically every major road in Targovishta. So after everybody left, the Ottoman Empire came into the city, and the only thing they found, it was dead silent. There was not a living soul. The only thing that they found when they moved in was just rows upon rows upon rows of impaled bodies.
Yeah, it sounds like I bet they were horrified by the sight, to be honest. Like, even them.
Yeah, so just set the scene. You are an Ottoman soldier entering the city of Targovishta. The city is dead silent. You walk for several minutes along the cobbled road without seeing a single living soul. Not even animals. The animals are gone. They have left. As you approach the city, the center of town, like the central square, in the distance you see strange structures sticking out of the ground ahead of you. And as you approach them, you discover, to your horror, numerous men, women, and children who have been stripped naked and are impaled. The wooden spikes pushing through their abdomen from their rectum all the way through the side of either through the side of their neck or through their throat up into their mouth.
I bet you they felt like you would imagine like a whoever finds like the aftermath of like a horror movie, like, because obviously they never show that shit, but like whoever discovered the aftermath of Camp Crystal Lake after Jason's mom, were in the following ones where Jason's actually there, shows up, and like you find all the fucking bodies.
Yeah, and just imagine it, because now Ottoman historians after the fact will say that they will estimate that there were like 20,000 bodies. That's not true. There were probably closer.
Is that over or under?
Way less. There were way less in reality.
Okay. That felt like the large number. I didn't know for certain.
Keep in mind, Targovishta only had a population of about 30,000, which was a decent-sized city for the time, but it wasn't big enough that 20,000 could die and the city kept going. That's not realistic. In reality, it was probably a couple hundred. But just imagine that. You go into a city, it's completely dead silent. Everybody's abandoned the city, and the only thing that you find are just hundreds of dead bodies that are impaled on spikes.
It sounds like nightmare fuel.
Yeah. That discovery, combined with the fact that it was the middle of the summer in a swampy country, and the only farmland that you'd come across so far was like burned. Like, so you didn't have any food to be able to like scrounge off. the Ottoman Empire, or the Ottoman army that was invading Wallachia, was starving at this point. They were running out of water, they were running out of food. All they could, like, they occupied Targovista, but it was a very brutal campaign that, like, on the Ottoman army. They didn't have a lot left in them. All they could really do was, like, they occupied Targovista, they put Radu in power, they made him the new voivod, and then they left. Because there was nothing else that they could do. Because, for one thing, like I said, the heat and the lack of water was taking its toll. And after seeing what Vlad had done in the city, 200 or 300 of his own people just mounted on spikes, stripped naked, and just imagine it. It's fucking horrifying. Like, nobody wants to be in the country anymore.
I refuse to, like, imagine it to the degree it would need to get the horror. But I'm horrified at the idea of, like, doing that to your own... One, doing that in general. But, like, obviously we gotta throw certain bullshit to the side. I can't imagine doing that to my own people, even if I'm, like, in the midst of, like, unending cruel war, whatever. Like, it just warps me as a human being, if I'm the leader, whatever. Like, it fundamentally changes me into a horrible fucking human being. I couldn't imagine doing that to my own people in any worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's fucking terrible. It's fucking horrible. But it worked. That's the fucking thing. That's the fucking thing with Vlad. He found himself, he was born into a world where he had the ability to do this horrible shit, and this horrible shit actually had tangible results on his political power. Like, it had tangible benefits. And that's the worst part. It's fucking horrible. Imagine a political situation so fucked up that doing this shit had actual positive benefits to your own, like, ability to rule.
It's like if Trump actually, like, did something and it got everyone in line instead of just dividing the country and let him... Where he's dividing the country now, but, like...
Yeah. Yeah, imagine how...
and that allows him to keep going. But imagine if it got to the point where, like, everyone was just so much in fear, like, oh, we just need to fucking step out of the fucking way.
Yeah, like, imagine if Trump actually, like, had Hillary Clinton, like, executed on, like live TV. And it actually strengthened his ability to, like, rule. Imagine how fucked up a country, like, how much fucked up shit would have to happen before that for that to be a rational thing to happen. That's the situation that Wallachia is in at this point. That's how fucked up things have gotten.
Why are you trying to make me feel glad that we live in the timeline we do, compared to whatever timeline that would fucking be?
I'm not trying anything. I'm just trying to give some historical context.
I know. I'm just like, I'd rather be in this timeline than that timeline for fucking sure, though.
Yeah, but that is something that I thought about while, like, writing the script, is if Donald Trump lived during that time, he may not have done the same shit that Vlad did, but he would have been willing to.
Yeah. He would have wanted to be Vlad.
Like, if Trump had, like, the political acumen that Vlad did, that would have been something that he would have done. That would be something he would be doing right now, if it were reasonable.
See, what I view Trump as, like, he looks back on fascist dictators and all that stuff and wants to execute what they did in modern times here now. And this is my personal opinion. People can nuance whatever. I feel like he definitely wants to go authoritarian, however you want to take that. But he doesn't have the follow through to get it through the right way to, like, actually make it where people believe that shit. At least the whole of the country.
So yeah, the Ottomans were thoroughly spooked by this, and were also suffering casualties because it was...
Fucking rightly so.
Yeah. And they were also suffering casualties because the summer heat. So they put Radu in charge, and they fucking left. So Vlad would continue kind of trying to fight against Ottoman forces in Wallachia for a little while. He won a couple of battles against Radu, but just the looming threat of Ottoman invasion kind of forced him to leave. He wasn't able to really do anything. So he was forced back across the Carpathian Mountains into Transylvania. And he started writing letters begging King Matthias of Hungary to go to war with the Ottomans so that he could reclaim his throne. But Matthias didn't really think very highly of Vlad. He saw him as just another ruler of Wallachia, and Wallachia at this point had just been a revolving door of voivods. So he kind of saw just Vlad as just another step. And now Vlad was out of power and Radu was in power. So he started trying to court Radu. And so in the process of trying to make friends with Radu, he decided to kind of stamp down on Radu's opponents as rivals for power in Wallachia, and that included Vlad. And so he would eventually arrest Vlad and lock him up.
Okay.
And so Vlad was now really just out of power. This was the end of Vlad's second reign. After this happened, now, when Vlad invaded the Ottoman Empire, the Pope stepped in and he was like, hey, this is really fucking cool. This is really good what you're doing. Jesus likes you for doing this. So what I'm going to do, the Pope said, I'm going to give you a bunch of money. I'm going to give you a lot of weapons. I'm going to give you some troops from across Europe to help you kind of fight this war against the Ottomans.
To fight Vlad, right?
No, giving them to Vlad in order to fight against the Ottomans.
Okay. Sorry, the audio thing's still happening, obviously. I was trying to clarify.
So after Matthias of Hungary arrested Vlad, the Pope stepped in and was like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? This guy was fighting the Ottomans. He was doing a decent good job for where the situation he was in. Why the fuck are you arresting him? And so here's the fucking kicker. Matthias lied to the Pope.
He lied to the Pope.
He lied to the Pope. He forged 3 letters. He gave 3 letters to the Pope and basically said, look, this is what Vlad was writing to the Ottoman Sultan. And these letters said, in God's Latin, that he was writing to the Pope that he would betray Hungary if Vlad would stop invading his country. He basically, these letters said that Vlad was conceding to the Sultan. There were 3 problems with these letters. One was that Vlad was famously good, had famously good penmanship. All of the leaders in Europe that he wrote to commented on how good his penmanship was. He had really good handwriting. These letters had fucking awful handwriting.
So in today's words, and this is put derogatorily / jokingly, they would say he writes like a girl.
I'd say the opposite, because nowadays, the stereotype is girls write really well and guys write awful.
I meant for today's stereotype.
Yeah,
if you compare it modernly, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, he had really good penmanship, and these letters that Matthias presented to the Pope had terrible penmanship. They were barely legible. Whoever wrote these had horrible handwriting. The second thing was that Vlad was fluent in Latin. The Ottomans had gone out of their way to teach him Latin when he was being raised as a hostage. and he knew fluent Latin.
And they fucked it up?
The Latin in these letters was terrible. It was filled with grammatical errors and spelling errors that were just awful. And there were examples of, we have letters.
So did the Pope buy it or not?
We don't know.
We don't know?
Yeah. All we know is that he let Matthias arrest him. He didn't press the issue any further. So, presumably he fell for it, but, I have a hard time believing he fell for it. I think he just didn't have, the willpower to, really care about it.
He didn't want to rock the boat, more likely, than he bought it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, Hungary was more important than Wallachia. It was more important to have Hungary on the Pope's side than it was to have Wallachia, because Wallachia had a constant revolving door of leadership. Hungary was a major power in Europe and was one of the presumed leaders of the Holy Roman Empire. That was important to keep on the Pope's side.
Obviously. So
even if he didn't buy the letters, it was politically advantageous for him to keep the Hungary on his side.
I mean, obviously.
I wanted to mention one more thing about those letters. We have examples of Vlad writing letters to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire because he did it a lot, because he had a lot of political dealings with the Ottoman Empire. So we have examples of him writing letters to the Sultan. In none of those letters did he write them in Latin. He wrote them in Turkish because he was fluent to Turkish. He grew up speaking Turkish because he was raised in the Ottoman Empire. He didn't write his...
So it was a barely veiled bullshittery.
It was such obvious bullshit, these letters. It was such obvious bullshit. He was feeding the Pope, and the Pope just decided to buy it because it was politically advantageous. And it pisses me off so bad.
Okay. So what happened next?
I wanted to mention that. So, here's the thing. Matthias of Hungary would keep Vlad in prison for 14 years.
14 years?
14 years. That's a fucking long time.
So what happened at the end of the 14 years?
So, during that time, Radu had been overthrown, along with, revolving door of Wallachia. A few different voivods had been overthrown. And the guy that was in power after 14 years was this guy named Basarab Laoshe. I want to spell this for you. Basarab is his first name. His last name is Laiota. And the A has a little, curve over it.
Okay, that's fucking weird.
I have no fucking idea how to pronounce that. I don't know how to pronounce Romanian. But yeah. Basarab Laoshe. Basarab had submitted himself to the Ottomans. And the Voivod of Moldavia, the guy to the north of Wallachia, asked Matthias to free Vlad so that they could put a loyal guy in charge of the Wallachian throne. Matthias agreed to that in 1475, but even though he agreed to it, he refused to give Vlad an army in order to enter Wallachia, in order to overthrow this guy Basarab. And so, instead, he just kind of bounced around Hungarian territory, just kind of trying to find a place to live, kind of trying to find allies that would maybe throw him some money to raise an army so he can invade Wallachia again. Eventually, Matthias, after freeing him, would order him to go down to Serbia so that he could lead an army. Now, this sounds confusing, doesn't it?
Yeah?
Yeah, I want you to know that I don't understand it any more than you do. This is all fucking confusing. I don't know what Matthias was thinking. The actual logic behind all of this is lost to history. We don't know what political shit was going on in the background that caused him to make these decisions. He just did. So eventually Vlad would be freed, and Matthias would put him in command of an army that was fighting in Serbia.
Okay.
In like the Western Balkans. And so, of course, as soon as he had an army, he was back to his old tricks. Everywhere his army went, he had both civilians and captured Ottoman soldiers impaled on the side of the road. So he just kept up with his impaling shit.
Because he's gotta get shit impaled. Well, of course, he's the impaler.
Yeah, what else is the impaler going to do? Eventually, his army in Serbia would capture the fortress at Srebrenica, and they would drive the Ottomans out of... I say Serbia, I know if there are any, like, Balkan people that are listening to this right now, they're going to be pissed off at me for saying that, but back then, that's what it was. It was part of, like, Greater Serbia. Technically, this was part of Bosnia, like modern-day Bosnia.
Well, I think you've got to... I don't think people should be getting that anal over shit when we're talking in a historical reference, not, hey, we're recognizing it modernly as this, rather than, hey, we're talking about a point in time that this is what it would have been called at that point in time.
Yeah. I promise to if we happen to have any listeners from Croatia, Bosnia, or Kosovo, I promise you, more like with every fiber of my being, I will be fair to your countries. At this point in medieval early modern history, it is all just part of Greater Serbia. I'm sorry, that's just how the history turned out. You are all from legitimate, real countries. Your identities and your experiences are valid. That's just what the politics of the time was like. It was part of Greater Serbia. That does not excuse... Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. This isn't directed at you, Tim. This is directed at our audience.
You're fine.
If they happen to be from the former Yugoslavia. I support the right of Bosnia and Croatia and the Kosovans to their autonomy. Serbia does not have a right to you. During the Middle Ages, you were part of Greater Serbia. That's just a fact. But I promise you, I support your independence. Don't worry about that. I promise you I support you. Anyways, I'm sorry, I had to do that. Bosnian politics is fucking insane, especially in the last 100 years. I just want to let them know that, because
I want to say that, like, obviously not last 100 years, but, like, the last 10 years, all politics has been fucking insane. Like...
Yeah, I'm talking about...
The fact that we're probably going to overthrow Venezuela again. The fact that America's the way it is. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine.
I'm just talking about specifically in the context of the former Yugoslavia.
I know, I'm just saying shit's fucked everywhere right now.
Anyways, Sultan Mehmed, after being driven out of Bosnia, he decided to turn his attention to Moldavia. So he invaded and he deposed the pro-Hungarian voivode of Moldavia, this guy named Stephen III, who is a cousin of Vlad.
So Vlad is going after another cousin?
Not yet. No, he's on the side of Hungary at this point. He's fighting for Hungary at this point.
I know, I just thought he was sent after his cousin this time, is what I kind of...
No, the Ottomans have now overthrown his cousin in Moldavia, which is north of Wallachia. So he teamed up with this guy. You're going to recognize this name. You may not recognize the first name, but you'll recognize his family name. He teamed up with this guy named Stephen Bathory.
Oh, goodness. Let's take a sip for Bathory showing back up.
Yeah, the Bathorys are part of this story. And so he teamed up with Stephen...
I remember you mentioning it earlier, but I didn't assume they'd actually show up in this kind of manner.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this guy named Stephen Bathory, who's a distant cousin of Elizabeth Bathory, they team up and they invade Moldavia, They kicked the Ottomans out, and they put Stephen III back in power in Moldavia, and now they're on a roll. Like, they are kind of a power duo. Like, Vlad and Stephen work, or Vlad and, hold on, sorry, Jesus Christ. Yeah, Vlad and Stephen Bathory work really well together. So they kick the Ottomans out of Moldavia, and then they invade Wallachia, kick the Ottomans out of there, they kick the Pretender out of Wallachia, and Vlad, once again, for the third time, takes power of Wallachia. And he is once again named Voivod.
I was convinced there wouldn't be a third time. Sip?
Yep. And so they invade Wallachia in November of 1476, and he regains his throne. In December of 1476, the overthrown Voivod, the guy that he overthrew, Basarab, he is given command of an Ottoman army by the Sultan, and he invades Wallachia.
Wallachia just cannot get any rest, can it?
They really fucking can't. And so, this is the third time that Vlad is the ruler of Wallachia, and it lasts about 2 months. Once again, just like his first rule.
Aww.
Because either in December of 1476 or January of 1477, Vlad is killed. Vlad dies. His army is cornered by the Ottoman army near the town of Snagov. We don't know the exact details of his death or the exact date. One story goes that he was killed by an Ottoman assassin. Another claims that his own men mistook him for a Turkish soldier late in the night and ended up killing him. We don't know for sure. Famous.
Do you think he was asked for his last words?
No, that is so far out of the amount of detail that we have about his death. We're not even sure, the details of the battle. We're not sure even the exact...
Dude, I was trying to make another reference. Fuck you.
Oh, sorry. I'm really drunk.
I'm going to make the reference anyway.
Hey, kids.
If they asked for his last word, do you think they asked any last words, monster?
The aristocrats.
Have you ever thought about carbonating the blood of Christ? Give the kids something fizzy to drink before they wake up in an hour?
Hey, kids, you want to see a dead body?
That's probably a better reference than me.
Hey, kids, we don't see a dead body. So, there's a famous story that after he was killed, his body was found in the swamp by some Ottoman soldiers. And his body was decapitated. And his head was sent back to Constantinople. And in a famous historical irony, his head was mounted on a spike, on a wooden pike, in Constantinople.
I mean, he kind of deserves it at this point.
That would be a fitting end for him. It'd be very poetic. We don't know what became of his body exactly. It's claimed that his skull was buried somewhere in a neighborhood in Constantinople. It's a neighborhood in Constantinople called Bankalar Kadesi, which is Turkish for Bank Street, because that's the street where all the historic banks were in Constantinople. This district of Constantinople is also called Voivod Street, Voivod Kadesi, because there's a rumor that Vlad's skull is buried there. So today, if you visit Istanbul, you ask them where Voivod Kadesi is, they'll direct you to the right spot, because that's what it's called, because it was named after Vlad's title of Voivod. Which I thought that was really interesting.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, there's an entire area of the famous city of Constantinople that is named after his title, because it's rumored that part of his body might be buried there. I think that's a really interesting part of this story. That he had that kind of that kind of historical impact even on the city of Constantinople, where he was universally hated.
I mean, I feel like the man would have been universally hated just about anywhere at that point.
That's fair. Here's the thing, though. He's not hated in Romania. But I'll get to that in a second. Anyways, we don't know what became of his body either. It's generally accepted that his head was removed and a skull was put on display in Constantinople. Other than that, we really don't know what happened to his body. The most likely burial place for his body is an unmarked grave at the Kamana Monastery, which was in a town. The Kamana Monastery, he actually, when he ruled, he helped found. He, gave the monks the funds to found this monastery. And it just happened to be nearby to where he died. And so it's possible he ended up.
Talk about, a coincidence.
Yeah, it's very likely that he ended up being buried there. That's confounded by the fact that the graveyard at that monastery was used as a very large mass grave for a lot of different battles that happened to occur in that area. And so if his body isn't there, it's mixed in with a lot of other bones. So we're probably never going to know for sure if it was actually his grave. So in the decades after he died, there were a number of accounts and exaggerations that were spread across Europe about Vlad's rule, especially regarding his cruelty. Most of these accounts were German tales. They were told in the German language. They were published throughout the Holy Roman Empire by Transylvanian Saxons who experienced his violence firsthand. These stories both inflated the number of people that he impaled from... In reality, here's where we get into the actual numbers. In reality, the likely number of people that he impaled was around 2,000.
Okay.
Which is a lot of people.
It's still a fuckload of people.
That's still a fuckload of people. But a lot of the contemporary, or immediately after his death, the accounts claimed that he had impaled up to 100,000 people. Which is just not possible.
I find that hard to believe, even with historical context.
Yeah, no. That is not possible. That is obviously exaggerated. The likely number is around 2,000.
I find that hard to believe that someone would be able to, even with modern stuff, kill/impale 100,000 people. It'd be a hard sell.
Remember, this is a very backwater area in late medieval Europe. They would not have had the infrastructure to be able to impale that many people. It is not logically possible, never mind morally possible. But those are the kinds of stories that got told about him in the decades following his death, particularly by the Transylvanian Saxons, which, because they were writing about it in the German language, ended up being spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire in Central Europe, and eventually made it into English language publications as well, like we're familiar with. And not only did they inflate the numbers of the people that he impaled, but it also exaggerated the kind of horrible shit that he got into. For instance, it was in the chronicles of a Transylvanian Saxon priest that we get the rumor that Vlad would, while he was impaling his victims, he would set out a lunch table for himself, and he'd set up a meal for himself, and he would take the blood of his victims and dip his bread in it. And that is where we get the rumor, the legend of Vlad drinking the blood of his enemies. which,
That's kind of bullshit connection for the blood of the enemy is kind of shit. But whatever, because that very clearly says, like, I was at it after the fact, if you're looking at it. This is extra extraneous stuff that says, hey, I was trying to boast on this and make the guy look even eviler than he was.
yeah. And even though this was written by people that did directly, like, witness and experience the violence that he inflicted upon the Transylvanian Saxons, this was all written after his death. And so it's safe to say that a lot of this shit was exaggerated to make him out as the bad guy in, like, the complicated political machinations that made up the era of that era of time. And it just so happened that Vlad happened to be a particularly brutal leader who gave them a lot of fodder to be able to write about. And it happened to happen at the same time that the movable type was becoming a technology that was widespread throughout the German-speaking world, which caused that story to spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire. And eventually that made it into the English language literature. So that's where his reputation as, like, a brutal, bloodthirsty, sadistic tyrant comes from in, like, Western Europe. His legacy is a lot more complicated in Eastern Europe. Because in the folklore of Eastern Europe, particularly in the Balkans and in Romania, he's kind of seen as, like, an anti-hero. Kind of like the Punisher. Because,
I mean, if you take him into context from where he's from, yeah, it would make sense why he's seen that way.
yeah, like, he's considered, in modern-day Romania, he's considered a national hero. They considered him, like, one of the great founders of the Romanian national identity because of the skill and the strategic mind that he showed in defying and in a lot of ways, like, genuinely deserved stopping the Ottoman expansion into Eastern Europe. Like, I don't think that that's, like, an undeserved reputation that he has as, like, one of the guys who helped stop Ottoman expansion into Eastern Europe. I think he does deserve some credit for that. But they in Eastern European folklore, particularly Romanian folklore, he's kind of seen as, like, they recognize that he was a tyrant, that he was bloodthirsty, that he killed a lot of innocent people, but they see it as, in the folklore, they consider it like a positive because in the time and place that it happened, he helped strengthen the Wallachian state to be able to defend against Ottoman tyranny, and that was the greater evil. And so he committed a lot of lesser evils to defend against a greater evil. That's the kind of reputation that he has amongst, like, the Slavic world. So particularly Romania, but to some extent.
Now would have been the perfect time to have that one quote I did on the evil thing, the necessary evil quote.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Darn it.
But yeah, that's kind of he does have a very positive, he has a generally neutral reputation in most of Eastern Europe. In Romania, he has a very positive connotation as, like, a defender of Romania against Ottoman expansion.
I mean, I can understand why that there's such a difference in the viewing of his history. Like, there's very good reason for that.
So, in the 1800s, there was an Irish novelist named Abraham Stoker, or his pen name, Bram Stoker. He became fascinated with Eastern European folklore around vampires, And he began writing a novel inspired by that folklore, or at least like a corrupted, like chauvinistic Western European version of that folklore version. And he used that folklore as an inspiration for a novel that he wrote about a Romanian count who secretly immigrated to England in order to prey on the weak and the innocent, using his supernatural powers to drink their blood. The initial working title of this novel's manuscript was called The Undead. But at the last minute before publication, Stoker came across a few books that discussed the life and the myths surrounding Vlad III, Dracula, particularly his taste for blood. And so at the last minute, he altered his manuscripts so that the name of the antagonist of the book was Dracula. And he changed the name of the title of the book to Dracula. And as a result, that novel, which eventually became one of the best-selling novels of all of human history, cemented Vlad Tepes's place in the history of the great monsters of the Western canon.
Oh yeah, that firmly I think if it weren't for the Dracula novel, he would be an obscure part of history that we might cover on the podcast, but it wouldn't be because it would be because eventually you would have gotten into a weird niche and be like, oh, here I
right, yeah,
heard of this weird guy called Vlad Tepes, he impaled people. If there wasn't the zeitgeist for Vlad the Impaler that we have, we wouldn't have been covering it in the way we did. But I feel like we might have eventually covered it because you would have gone on a rabbit hole and eventually discovered his name.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if it weren't for this one novel, Vlad very likely, genuinely honestly, probably the majority of the shit that we know about him is only because it's been uncovered by historians who were fascinated by the story of this guy who inspired the great vampire of Gothic horror. And we probably wouldn't know a fraction of the shit that we do about him if it weren't for the fact that his name happened to be tied to this horror novel. But yeah, thanks to Bram Stoker, we know more about this guy. And beyond my interest in Vlad Dracula is less to do with his connection to the modern myth of the vampire and that role in modern literary horror. My interest is more in just the fascinating period of time that the actual guy lived in, and the actual bloodthirst that he really did have as not just a personal impulse to violence, but as an actual political practicality for the era that he lived in. I think that is endlessly fascinating.
I would like to think obviously you've been more investigative of your interest in history than I have. I've always been curious at where that originated from, because I knew there was a really good story there outside of the Dracula references, but looking into that stuff just isn't my forte per se, yours is. And yes, we only really I said earlier that I feel like we would have still eventually covered it on the podcast if he wasn't famous because of that. But you mentioned that we only know half the shit we do because of the zeitgeist around him. So maybe we wouldn't have, because we wouldn't have had enough to actually cover.
Yeah, it's really complicated because on the one hand, like this his reputation within like historical fiction has cast a lot of has it's brought a lot of like the myths about him into the zeitgeist, and it's made it a lot harder to kind of communicate his real story to the general public. But at the same time, just the fact that he was made so popular by historic like this gothic fiction is the only reason that we like people invested in as much time as they have into researching him as they have, that we know as much about that era of history, which when you really look into it, like the proxy war between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire is endlessly fascinating and also important to understanding like the political context of the rest of European history and Western history in general. And I think that's a really important thing that we only know about because of the fact that his name is so closely associated with this sort of horror genre. And I think that's really important. Like with whichever side you land on, whether it's like regardless of the myths that we have about him or the truths that we have been able to uncover about him because of the myths, it's a good thing that we know about him.
Oh yeah, for certain.
This has been, I know this is a lot of like the sentimental part of me coming out because you got me extremely drunk during this episode, but just the fact that I was able to research and learn about this guy and the era of history that he lived in has been extremely enriching to the way that I see the world. And I deeply appreciate that I was able to learn more about him, despite the fact that he was such a bloodthirsty monster in his life. I appreciate that I can know more about the world that he came up in and the world that inspired him to do the things that he did. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn about it.
I think that's something that we fail to like take into account when we look at historical figures, is the world that shaped them and why they are the way they are. Because like you can see this horrible act, and like we can look at it from a modern context and say that's a horrible, that you should never have gotten to that point, and that they're a piece of shit, and they should have like never have gotten to the point they are. But you have to look back then and see what was happening that led them to that point, and realize that they are a product of their time, and that no matter what we do, a lot of times we have to deal with that shit.
Yeah, and there's just like especially that era of time, because that was smack dab in the middle. Vlad Dracula was born and raised on the front line of the transition between the medieval Europe and the modern Europe that shaped the entire modern world. And he was on the front lines of that. He experienced all of the most traumatic shit that went along with that transition. And he is such a good benchmark for understanding the world that we eventually created out of that transition and why we ended up the way that we were. I am infinitely appreciative of the fact that I got to learn about this guy and learn about the area that he ruled in.
So, Derek, any final words?
No, just...
Alrighty, sources, and then where can they find you?
Sources... there's this really good researcher this Romanian researcher named Radu Florescu, who did 2 books called In Search of Dracula and Dracula, Prince of Many Faces, His Life and Times. Incredible books that do a really good job of putting his life into the context of Romanian history and Romanian folklore. And yeah, that's the main 2 that I use. As far as social media goes, I'm on Blue Sky. My username is @Visigoth. The O is 0. Tim, where can they find the podcast stuff?
So they can find me at Tim, aka Otis, on Blue Sky, and they can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Alexander Society Pod. On Twitter, I'm sorry, we don't use Twitter anymore. There's an account there, but we don't fucking mess with that shit anymore. Blue Sky at Alex Society Pod, and then TikTok at Alexander Society, even though I'm too lazy to do shit with that. And they can find, if they've enjoyed what they've listened to, they can give us a rate and review on their streaming platform of choice, and we will see them next time.
Boo.